Yili obeyed and went forward to greet them. Su Hongyu waved his hand and said, "Forget it, Li'er just came back from the Su family today. There's no special visit." Su Hongyan also nodded with a sullen face and said, "That's right. Eldest brother and I had something to tell Li'er yesterday, so we took her over. We didn't expect that she would cause so much trouble. It's our Su family that didn't think it through." Old Madam Yi and Minister Yi looked at each other awkwardly. Although Su Hongyan said that it was the Su family's fault, how could they not hear the blame for the Yi family? After the rumor spread, the Yi family did nothing. They even sent someone to the Su family to ask about it. How could the Su family not feel bitterly disappointed? But old Madam Yi looked at the slim and graceful young girl in front of her and still couldn't make up her mind. She really couldn't tell whether Yili really went to the Su family yesterday or was kidnapped by bandits like the rumor said. If something really happened to him, then, Su Hongyan looked at old Madam Yi and Minister Yi and snorted in dissatisfaction. Su Hongyu, who was beside him, glanced at him and smiled at Yili. "Didn't you say that Li went out with Miss Hua and Miss Qin? When uncle came over, I heard that the two young ladies from the Qin family and Hua family were dragged by General Murong's daughter to cause trouble for second young Master Leng. Could it be that Li'er also went to cause trouble?" Yili didn't expect Murong Ting to cause such a ruckus. She quickly shook her head and said, "Li'er and Prince Ding went to Fenghua building and met Zhaoyang eldest princess and Zhaoran eldest princess. Then they came back. It's Li'er's fault for making uncle wait for so long." "Oh. Went to Fenghua building with Prince Ding. It's okay. It's not a bad thing for young people to walk around." Su Hongyu was obviously very satisfied with Yi Li's answer. Su Hongyan also nodded and casually complained, "Your aunt often reminds Qingze to accompany Miss Qin to go out for a walk. That kid just has to be a blockhead. It's as if saying half a word more will make him suffer." Yili thought of Su Qingze's cold expression and couldn't help but smile. Zheng was obviously the most gentle and pleasant one among them, but she had a cold and serious fiancé. They had been in the capital for so long. It seemed that other than the time when second aunt sent a gift to the Qin family, the two hadn't officially met. Without looking at Minister Yi and old Madam Ye's changing expressions, Su Hongyu directly turned to Minister Yi and said, "I have something to tell Li'er alone." "I don't know." Minister Yi had always been afraid of this brother-in-law. He didn't dare to say no. He quickly said, "Then Li'er will take eldest brother and second brother to your courtyard to sit. Later, brother will prepare a banquet. 2 brothers, please come." Chapter 74. "Very good, this is the daughter of my Su family." After a long time, Su Hongyu put down his teacup and said calmly. Yili was startled and quickly raised her head to look at eldest uncle. Su Hongyu looked at Yili with a trace of sadness in his eyes. Although the men of the Su family have always been scholarly, they have always been strong enough. No amount of suffering is enough to make us give up what belongs to us. However, the daughters of the Su family are indeed intelligent, but they are also more fragile than normal women. Just like your mother, if Xiaomei had been as strong as you, how could she have ended up like this? Eldest uncle. Every time her mother was mentioned, eldest uncle would be very sad. Yili thought of her weak and beautiful mother in her memories and couldn't help but sigh. When her mother was young, she had been protected too well by the Su family, so she couldn't accept the reality of marriage. She could only slowly wither away in the Yi family's courtyard. Su Hongyu waved his hand. "Prince Ding is a very outstanding man. Even now, I still think so. However, no matter how you look at it, he is not a good choice for a husband. Li'er, do you know why the Su family didn't object to this marriage?" Yili looked at eldest uncle's gentle but slightly dignified gaze. She hesitated and said, "The emperor's order is difficult. That can be considered one reason." Su Hongyu said, "But if the Su family really isn't willing, it's not like there's no solution. Your maternal grandfather still has some face. If your maternal grandfather personally goes to the capital to ask the emperor to retract the order, the emperor won't refuse. Yi Li was shocked and quickly said, absolutely not. Maternal grandfather is already old and has finally left the turmoil of the capital. How could he get involved in it for Lear? Not to mention other things, her maternal grandfather was already over 70 years old this year. Yi Li couldn't accept having the old man travel all the way to the capital. A trace of relief flashed across Su Hongyu's face. He reached out to pat Yi Li and said, your maternal grandfather knows that Lear is a filial child. Yi Li lowered her head and thought for a while. She frowned in confusion and said, Li, I really can't think of it. Uncle, please enlighten me. Su Hongyu sighed and said, because of your identity, if your surname is Su, the Su family can legitimately refuse the emperor's betrothal for you. She could even marry into an ordinary scholarly family in Bingzhou. The Su family didn't need more glory and wealth. However, your surname is Yi. Other than the imperial family, there is also the Yi family that can decide your marriage. Moreover, you were previously married to the late emperor. Although His Majesty annulled the engagement between you and Prince Li, he betrothed Yi Ying to Prince Li. Yi Ying is said to be the daughter of the first wife of the Yi family, but in fact, she is just the daughter of a concubine. The emperor wants to put your father in an important position and dotes on Yi Jiaoyi. If you want to satisfy the world's elites, then you can't marry worse than Yi Ying. In other words, if you don't marry Prince Ding, then you will still be betrothed to other princes, or even, enter the palace as a concubine. There is no need to consider entering the palace. Uncle and your grandfather have considered all the unmarried princes and can only choose Prince Ding. Yi Li nodded in agreement with her uncle's words. Actually, Prince Ding is much better than Li originally expected. Although now I realize, it might be more troublesome than originally thought. But it's not impossible to accept, right? Uncle also said that Prince Ding is an excellent man. Su Hongyu looked at Yi Li strangely and said, Li, what did you think Prince Ding was like? Yi Li smiled with some embarrassment and said, isn't there a rumor outside that Prince Ding is disabled and disfigured? Is he seriously ill? Anyone could imagine what such a tragic person would look like. So the current Mo Xiuyao was already unexpectedly good. Su Hongyu obviously could imagine it too. She glared at her unhappily and said, if that's really the case, then you might as well think of a way to poison him. Even if you can't marry for the rest of your life, it's still better than marrying a cripple. Yi Li didn't care if she would marry a cripple or not. In any case, with the family background of the Prince Ding mansion, it was impossible for her to personally serve Mo Xiuyao. She would just treat it as spending the rest of her life with him. He wasn't that crippled now, but there were more troubles than expected. Yi Li could already foresee that her life after marriage would not be as good as she imagined it to be if her uncle was worried and personally came to tell her these things. Only when your brother mentioned it last night did I notice that the Yi family is simply a bunch of bastards these years. And you, after staying in the capital for so many years, you don't even know the slightest bit about the people in the capital. Su Hongyu glanced at Yi Li unhappily. Yi Li hurriedly lowered her head to reflect on her mistake. It wasn't just her father who was afraid of her uncle. She was afraid of him too. In reality, other than her brother, she had never seen anyone who wasn't afraid of her uncle. Perhaps Mo Xiuyao could be counted as one. Her uncle's scolding was right. These years, she hadn't stepped out of the house. It was true that she had deliberately separated herself from her surroundings. Of course, Madame Wang had played a part in this, but the main responsibility still lay with her. Even though she had long accepted her current life, Yi Li still felt that her previous life was real in the depths of her heart. Her current life was more like a game or a dream. Of course, last night's risk made her feel a bit more real. How much do you know about the things that Hong Yan gave you before? Su Hongyu asked directly. Yi Li knew that her uncle was only referring to the information that her second uncle had given her regarding the relationships and important people in the capital. She hurriedly said, I memorized it all. Su Hongyu shook his head, there's no point in memorizing that kind of thing. You have to understand the relationships within. You know everyone in the Duhua household. You've also met noble consort Lu in the palace. Can you tell me what you think of the relationship between the current empress and noble consort Lu, the Duhua household, and the Lu household? Yi Li was astonished. Wasn't this going too far? However, she still seriously considered Su Hongyu's words. After a long time, she said, Li has never met the empress. However, I am quite familiar with the people in the Hua household. I have also met Princess Changel once. The empress is the current first wife. Although she is not favored, she should be a magnanimous and virtuous woman. As for noble consort Lu, she is somewhat arrogant and has a cold temperament. However, the emperor dotes on her very much and has 2 sons and 1 daughter. Therefore, the relationship between these two shouldn't be very harmonious. However, I haven't heard of any disagreements between the Hua and Lu families. Prime Minister Lu and Minister Yi disliked each other in court. At present, they could be considered evenly matched. However, the situation in the palace clearly showed that noble consort Lu was superior. Su Hongyu nodded, reminding her, that's correct. However, people's hearts are fickle. In particular, the hearts of those in the palace are even more difficult to fathom. In this aspect, you still need to put in more effort. It seems that Hongyu has only given you the current information. He probably thinks that you know everything from the early years. Yi Li was somewhat ashamed. A few years ago, especially when Mo Xiuyao's accident happened to be when her memories were in chaos and her body was weak. After she recovered, she rarely paid attention to the outside world. She truly did not know about those old matters. Second uncle probably did not expect that she would not even know about those matters that caused such a stir. How much does Li know about the Ding household? Yi Li understood that her eldest uncle had specially come over to teach her the basics. The first master of the Ding household was Mo Lanyun, the younger brother of the founding emperor of the Dechu state, Mo Qingtian. At the founding of the state, the founding emperor conferred upon him the title of Prince Ding, a hereditary prince. It was passed down for 3 generations. During the reign of the late emperor, the powerful officials bullied the young Prince Ding. At that time, Mo Lufang returned to the capital from the border and killed the powerful officials to support the young prince. He was then conferred the title of regent prince. When the late emperor was 16 years old, Mo Lufang returned to the throne. When the late emperor was 29 years old, Mo Lufang passed away due to illness. His eldest son, Mo Xiuwen, inherited the title. The following year, the late emperor passed away. In the current 3rd year, Mo Xiuwen was ordered to go to war. During the journey, he passed away due to illness and had no children. At the age of 18, Mo Xiuyao inherited the title and led the troops to war. He was ambushed and lost his soldiers. He almost died on the battlefield. Although he managed to turn defeat into victory, he also paid a heavy price. 3 months later, Mo Xiuyao's fiancée passed away due to illness. From then on, the Ding household could be said to have completely disappeared from the capital. Chapter 75. Is there anything else? Yi Li frowned and continued, every generation of the Ding king's residents produced talented people and they were well versed in both political and military affairs. Instead, the imperial family who came from the same bloodline paled in comparison. The most outstanding one was the first Prince Ding, Mo Lanyun. It was said that if he didn't marry a princess from the previous dynasty as his wife, he might have a higher chance of ascending the throne than the great ancestor. Then there was Mo Lufang, who was able to rule the country through martial arts. As for Mo Xiuyao, he was once hailed as a genius who wasn't inferior to his ancestor. If it wasn't for the fact that he was only 13 years old when Mo Lufang passed away, the throne might have been inherited by him from the start. The room was silent. Yi Li silently picked up the teapot and poured some tea for Su Hongyu. Only then did she hear Su Hongyu ask, "That's right." In a short 5 to 6 years, the Ding king's residence was ruined. What was supposed to be a peerless general fell to the mortal world. The legend of the Ding king's residence being invincible was also shattered. Do you know that at that time, the judgment that Mo Xiuyao was a genius who wasn't inferior to his ancestor was made by your maternal grandfather. Because of this, your maternal grandfather had regretted it for more than 10 years. Uncle, what do you mean? Yi Li was startled. Politics had never been severed since ancient times. Even now, with the decline of the Ding king's residence, various private speculations had never stopped. But hearing it from her maternal uncle's mouth, Yi Li couldn't help but be shocked. Under the shock, Yi Li quickly calmed down and said, "I heard that Prince Ding was indeed brilliant when he was young." Then even if maternal grandfather didn't say those words, the people of the Ding king's residence would still be targeted. Maternal grandfather only admired his talent and wasn't able to foresee the future. This matter, maternal grandfather doesn't need to blame himself. Su Hongyu nodded and praised, is already very knowledgeable at such a young age. Uncle is telling you this in hopes that you will understand the situation of the Ding king's residence. Although in the eyes of outsiders, the Ding king's residence has already declined to the point that it only has a false reputation left. But Yi Li looked at him and continued, but the Ding king's residence still has a trump card that the imperial family doesn't dare to touch him. Not bad. If not for this, Mo Xiuyao would have died of illness long ago. The reason why no one dared to touch him was because they were afraid of harming him. The deaths of the previous 2 generations of Prince Ding have already raised suspicions. If something were to happen to Mo Xiuyao, I'm afraid it would shake the foundation of the country. Yi Li sighed softly. She felt so cold that she gripped the teacup to absorb the warmth. Did His Majesty choose Li'er because he was also afraid of the Su family? Isn't he afraid that after the marriage between the Su family and the Ding family? Su Hongyu's gaze was cold. The ancestors of the Su family will never betray us as long as the royal family doesn't do anything to the Su family. There are people who believe such words. Yi Li was puzzled. Even a signed treaty could be torn to shreds at any time, let alone an oath. Su Hongyu glared at her in displeasure. This was written into the Su family's family rules. The Su family has been passed down for hundreds of years and is known for its integrity. Yi Li shrunk her neck and silently asked curiously, "Uncle, did the Su family make any oaths to the previous emperor?" Cough cough. Su Hongyu coughed a few times and glared at Yi Li in annoyance. Yi Li could only shrug her shoulders and hold her chin in silence. That's why, as a famous family that had not fallen for hundreds of years, how could they be so pedantic? It's not that we won't betray, it's just that the reward for betrayal isn't high enough. In the end, he glared at Yi Li. Su Hongyu sternly said, "In short, unless it is absolutely necessary, the Su family will not betray the royal family." The Su family did not lack fame or wealth, and they were not obsessed with power. The throne? What was the use of that? A wise ruler had to be prepared to exhaust himself to death. If they wanted to enjoy messing around, they had to be prepared to go down in history in infamy. Understands. Eldest uncle, who do you think wants to ruin my marriage with Prince Ding? If it's not the emperor? Yi Li asked. Su Hongyu shook his head. That's hard to say. Qing Chen only said that it was a woman. But we've filtered through almost all the women related to Prince Ding, and still couldn't find out who it was. Prince Ding himself should know. Did he say anything? At the mention of this, a trace of displeasure flitted across Su Hongyu's elegant face. Seeing Yi Li shake her head, he snorted softly and said, "He should know what he's doing. If something else happens that shouldn't happen, he's better off not being her husband. The Su family can afford to raise their granddaughter. Thinks that it might be a woman who admires Prince Ding." Yi Li didn't feel embarrassed in front of Su Hongyu, so she directly voiced her suspicions. Su Hongyu looked at her with a smile and said, a woman who admires Prince Ding? If you're talking about Prince Ding when he was young. At that time, at least half of the noble ladies in the capital adored him. But there wasn't a single one who had the ability to bribe the heavenly pavilion. Although Han Mingyue loves money as much as his life, he was also Prince Ding's best friend when he was young. He wouldn't provoke Prince Ding's fiancée for money. Then, what about the woman who admires Mo Xiaoyao and has a good relationship with Han Mingyue? Su Hongyu raised his eyebrows. There's one, but it can't be her. Yi Li blinked. Su Hongyu calmly put down his teacup and said, "Noble consort Lu." This time, it was Yi Li's turn to cough. Lu. Noble consort Lu. What's so strange about that? Noble consort Lu was known as the most talented woman in the capital. Even your eldest brother had never looked him in the eye. Instead, he spoke gently to Prince Ding at that time. Unfortunately, Prince Ding already had someone else at that time. Otherwise, they would have been a rare couple. Also, noble consort Lu was good at painting. Han Mingyue's painting skills were also known in the capital when he was young. The second volume of his painting of the Chu capital was of noble consort Lu. It's still priceless even now. However, after noble consort Lu entered the palace, this painting was bought at a high price. For some reason, Su Hongyu gave up on these heavy topics and began to gossip with Yi Li. Yi Li thought of the woman with cold eyes like pear blossoms in the palace. She was indeed worthy of being called a national beauty. Uncle, why did you say it wasn't her? Your eldest brother knew noble consort Lu. Although he didn't see her face and it's been so many years, your eldest brother is sure it wasn't noble consort Lu. Also, what kind of place do you think the palace is? A noble consort can casually walk around outside the palace with a group of people in the middle of the night. Yi Li nodded. She didn't really think it was noble consort Lu. Although she noticed that noble consort Lu despised her in the palace, she still deliberately picked on her. However, that woman's eyes didn't have any strong hostility or killing intent. Who was Mo Xiaoyao's original fiancé? Yi Li asked. She was really curious. What kind of woman could defeat noble consort Lu and win Mo Xiaoyao's heart? Also, it was reasonable to say that someone who could become Mo Xiaoyao's fiancé must be from a famous family. However, Yi Li searched her memory for a long time and couldn't find any famous noble family that had a beautiful daughter who died an unfortunate death 7 years ago. Su Hongyu glanced at her in disappointment and said, "Su Xiety." Yi Li nodded. Sounds like a very beautiful woman. Su Hongyu looked at his niece expressionlessly. Once again, he regretted that he didn't insist on bringing Li back to the Su family to be educated. Look at how she was raised by the Yi family now. He was talking about her future husband's ex-fiancée. Even if she was dead, she should at least show some interest, right? Only then did the world-renowned Sir Su realize that when his niece mentioned Prince Ding or Prince Li, she had never shown the slightest bit of shyness that a girl should have. She had never even blushed. Chapter 76. Which family is this Miss Su from? There didn't seem to be any Su family in the capital. Why do you think Old Master Su came to the Prince Ding mansion to deliver the betrothal gifts? Old Master Su. Su Xiety is Old Master Su's granddaughter. Su Hongyu said lightly. Then why did Old Master Su come? He came to see what kind of woman Prince Ding, who was supposed to be his grandson-in-law, married. Also, Su Xiety's death was a great blow to Prince Ding, who was already seriously ill. Old Master Su treated Prince Ding like his own grandson, so he came to support the Prince Ding mansion. Looking at her uncle's unhappy face, Yi Li smiled helplessly and said, "Uncle, I know what you mean. Prince Ding and I get along very well, so you don't have to worry." Su Hongyu looked at her disapprovingly and said, "What do you mean by very well? If you are the first one he gives up when he has to make a choice, then how can that be called very well?" Yi Li smiled lightly, "But, if I have to choose between uncle, grandfather, cousin, and Prince Ding, I won't choose him. How long have we known each other? Family is naturally more important. You are husband and wife. In the future, you will live with him for the rest of your life, not with uncle and grandfather. Uncle, do you think Prince Ding is the kind of man who will give up everything as long as he cares about you? Yes, as long as you can capture his heart. After a long talk, Su Hongyu left a lot of official, secret, and unofficial records for Yi Li to read when she had time. Then, he left with Su Hongyan under Minister Ye's uneasiness. Yi Li looked at her father's complicated eyes and slightly bowed to him. Then, she leisurely returned to her own Qingyi pavilion to study the history books. Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao's wedding was set for May 20th. It was said to be the best day in May. It was said that Yi Shangshu was not very satisfied with this date. After all, it was not a particularly auspicious day. Yi Ying's marriage situation had already made Yi Shangshu very angry. If Yi Li's marriage had any problems, Yi Shan and Yi Lin would not be able to get married. However, the Ding Palace and the Su family, including Yi Li herself, did not have any opinion on the auspicious date. Moreover, if they did not choose this date, then the wedding date would have to be pushed back to August at the very least. June and July were even less suitable for weddings. When Yi Li was kidnapped, no matter if it was the Ding Palace or the Su family, they would never allow the wedding to be postponed. Therefore, Minister Ye's dissatisfaction was naturally ignored. In the middle of May, Yi Li's leisurely life came to an end. The originally quiet Qing Yi Xian also became bustling with people coming and going. Every day, there were countless things that had to be sent to Qing Yi Xian. There were countless account books and lists that had to be personally reviewed by Yi Li. Even with the help of the two mamas, Yi Li was still very tired. When the people in the capital saw that the Yi family, Su family, and the Ding Palace were not affected by the rumors and were preparing for the wedding, the half-believing rumors gradually subsided. I'm so envious of Li. The Ding Palace's wedding will definitely be the grandest wedding in the past 10 years. In Qing Yi Xian, Mu Rongting laid on the soft couch without any care for her image as she hugged the first-grade expensive silk that had just been sent over. Yi Li, Qin Zheng and Hua Tianxiang were sorting out the account books. Not far away, Yi Shan and Yi Lin were also quietly doing needlework. Outside the door, there was still the noise of people coming and going. Hua Tianxiang raised her head to look at her in the gap between looking at the account books and said, Li didn't invite you to be envious and jealous. If you have the time to talk nonsense, why don't you come over and see if there's anything you can help with? But, you're right. Qin Zheng was writing and drawing on the account books as she asked, does Wang Furen really not intend to help you with the wedding at all? If this spreads out, it won't be good for her reputation. Yi Li smiled faintly. Old madam also added a lot of dowry. She's not feeling well these 2 days. She said that fourth sister is sick in the Li Palace and has to go over to take care of her. She left early in the morning. Mu Rongting snorted at this, who has heard of a mother running over to take care of her daughter who has just been married for less than a month? But, could Yi Ying really be sick? I actually didn't see her coming back to show off these days. Hua Tianxiang raised her eyebrows and smiled, then she has to have the ability to show off. If Li Wang treats her well, maybe she can come back to show off her newlywed bliss or something. But now I heard that Princess Xixia is still pestering Li Wang every day. It's already good that she hasn't become a resentful woman. Qin Zheng shook her head. She was not interested in these rumors. Instead, she was more concerned about Yi Li's marriage itself. I really don't know what Wang Furen is thinking. Everyone knows how many betrothal gifts the Ding Palace has sent. Even if the Yi family adds more, it won't be a loss to her. Isn't she losing face for the Yi family? Hua Tianxiang said, it's not like you don't know what Wang Furen's background is. Even if she is now Yi Daren's legal wife, her status is not enough to preside over Li Er's marriage. At that time, I'm afraid old Madam Yi will have to appear personally. By the way, there is no woman in the Ding Palace who can make the decision. Li, Did Prince Ding mention who can make the decision in the Ding Palace? Yili nodded and said, originally, Xiaoyang Grand Princess had this intention. However, although Prince Ding calls Xiaoyang Princess as aunt, it is said that they are of the same generation in terms of seniority. So Xiaoyang Grand Princess means to invite Shifu Grand Princess. Wow! Murongting cried out in surprise, almost jumping up from the soft couch. Seeing that everyone is looking at her, Murongting chuckles and says, Great Elder Princess Shifu. She's the late Emperor's aunt. Even Prince Ding of the previous generation has to respectfully call her imperial sister. I heard that Shifu Grand Princess is 75 years old this year. Qin Zheng nodded and said, in fact, if it weren't for Li Er's marriage this time, I would have forgotten that this princess is still alive. I heard that this princess has stopped caring about the affairs of the world more than 20 years ago. I didn't expect that she could come out to support Prince Ding's wedding this time. Hua Tianxiang waved her hand and said with a smile, it's nothing strange. My grandfather said that Great Elder Princess used to like Prince Ding the most. When Prince Ding was born, Great Elder Princess even held him. It was said that when Prince Ding had an accident and almost died, it was Great Elder Princess who took care of him day and night. In short, Prince Ding will invite Great Elder Princess to preside over the wedding, which shows his sincerity to Li. Murongting said with a smile, so I said that Li Er's wedding is probably the grandest wedding in the last 10 years. I heard that the dignitaries of other countries will also come to the wedding. Yili frowned and said, what does the wedding of Prince Ding Mansion have to do with the dignitaries of other countries? Li, don't underestimate the prestige of King Ding Mansion. King Ding Mansion has been established for 100 years, and it is not an exaggeration to say that it is powerful. Basically, all the countries close to the Chu state have dealt with King Ding Mansion. Yili nodded and said, I understand. They are here to see a joke. The only descendant of the prestigious King Ding Mansion, the current Prince Ding, was a disfigured disabled person in a wheelchair. What else could make the dignitaries of various countries happier than this? Perhaps the royal families of various countries were more interested in this wedding than the change of the Emperor of the Chu state. Everyone was silent for a moment and couldn't help but sigh. Yes, those envoys of various countries definitely didn't come to congratulate Prince Ding on his wedding, but to see how the only descendant of King Ding Mansion, who had been silent for 7 years, looked like and whether he could still pose a threat to them. Chapter 77. Yili waved her hand carelessly and said, it's not a big deal. What can they do to me in the capital of the Chu state? If you have the time to worry about this, why don't you help me organize these things? Tomorrow, second aunt will look through them. Yili had a headache as she looked at the messy gift lists and account books in front of her. Only now did she know that Arabic numerals and double-entry bookkeeping were really good things. But now was not the time to be in the limelight. She would have plenty of time to slowly organize them when she arrived at the Ding King's residence. Hua Tianxiang and Qin Zheng looked speechlessly at the account books that still had more than half of them in front of them and weakly lowered their heads. When they returned home, they must learn from their mother how to manage the household. There were too many of these things. Yi Lin and Yi Shan listened to them chatting on the side. They were both envious and sympathetic towards Yi Li. But they also knew that they could not get a word in on this. They could only listen and lower their heads to do the work in their hands. Murongting, who was originally lying weakly on the soft couch, suddenly jumped up and rushed to the half-open window. She leaned out and looked around for a long time before retracting her head in confusion. Hua Tianxiang looked at her and said, "What's wrong? Is there something outside the window?" Murongting shook her head and looked at Yili without saying anything. Yili smiled faintly and said, "I think I just saw a green bird fly by outside the window." Did Murongting also see it? Murongting blinked and said with annoyance, "Yes, I saw a very beautiful bird. Who would have thought that when I reached the window, I would disappear?" Qin Zheng giggled and covered her mouth. "Birds fly so fast, how could they wait for you?" Hua Tianxiang gave her a sideways glance. When did you start liking birds? If you really like it, ask your father to catch one for you. Otherwise, just buy a beautiful one. You don't need to be so surprised. I'm happy. Murong Ting raised her small face and proudly laid back on the soft couch. She also glared at Yili without a trace. Yili pursed her lips and smiled. Of course, she knew what Murong Ting had heard. In the past few days, there had been a few strange people who wanted to visit the Yi residence without going through the main entrance, but they were all thrown out by the bodyguards that Mo Xiuyao had sent to protect them in secret. However, it was rare for someone to barge in during the day. Miss, the Crown Prince of West Hill Genom of Gojoseon has sent a gift to congratulate you and Prince Ding on your wedding. Outside the door, the butler of the Yi residence came to report in person. Yili frowned and said, the Crown Prince of West Hill Genom of Gojoseon? Shouldn't the gifts be sent directly to King Ding's residence? The steward said respectfully, Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon said that this gift was specially prepared by Shiling for the future princess consort of Dinghua. Therefore, it must be sent directly to Miss to show the sincerity of Shiling Kingdom. Where is Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon now? Is father here? Yili asked. In the hall. Master has just returned and is accompanying him in the hall. The steward said. Yili nodded, I know. Please wait for father and Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon. I will go out later. The steward excused himself. Murong Ting pulled Yili worriedly and said, Yili, be careful when you go out. This Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon might not come with good intentions. Yili raised her eyebrows. The noble ladies in the capital did not know much about this. Murong Ting had followed General Murong for a long time when she was young, so she should know more than them. Qing Wan and others served Yili to change her clothes and redo her makeup. Murong Ting stood aside and said what she knew, the Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon of West Hill is the younger brother of the current West Hill Emperor. He is also a famous general of West Hill. But 20 years ago, he was defeated by Prince Ding's father, the regent Mo Lufang. At that time, my father was only a small lieutenant. I heard from my father that Genom of Gojoseon was defeated miserably in the battle. He even lost an arm in the chaos. After that, Genom of Gojoseon sent people to assassinate the regent many times, but they all failed at the last minute. You know, the regent has died long ago. If Genom of Gojoseon holds a grudge, then this grudge could only be held on her and Mo Xiuyao as Mo Liufang's son and daughter-in-law. So, Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon is here to find trouble. Qin Zhang's pretty face turned pale. She looked at Yili uneasily and said, should we send someone to inform Prince Ding? Yili shook her head and said, no need. Prince Ding should know very soon. Moreover, Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon would not come to make things difficult for a girl in the boudoir. That would be too embarrassing for Shiling State and Genom of Gojoseon. Even if he wanted to find trouble, he should be targeting Mo Xiuyao. They were not married yet. Looking in the mirror, Yili saw that she had tidied up properly. She stood up and said, I'll go take a look first. You guys wait for me here. Murong Ting rushed to stand beside Yili and said firmly, I'll go with you. Tian Xiang and Zheng Er stay. Yili did not know whether to laugh or cry. Murong, I'm not going to war. Murong Ting insisted, I don't care. Even if I secretly follow you, it's fine. If that Crown Prince Shannan has any ulterior motives, I can save you. Plotting against the future Princess Ding in public in Dechu State. Only Murong Ting could think of such a thing. Hua Tianxiang waved her hand and said, forget it. Take Murong with you. She just loves to watch the fun. Murong Ting did not care what they thought. She happily hugged Yili's arm and said, let's go, let's go. Father. After entering the hall, Yili realized that the steward's report was too careless. She thought that only her father and the guests would be present. She did not expect that Mo Jingli and Yi Ying would also be sitting with them. Murong Ting threw her a look that said, "Why is he everywhere?" Yi Li helplessly smiled at her and went forward to greet Minister Yi. In front of outsiders, Minister Yi was very willing to play the role of a good father who doted on his daughter. He affectionately smiled at Yi Li and said, "Li has come. Is Miss Murong also here?" Murong Ting curled her lips and said with a smile, "This junior has come uninvited. Please forgive me, uncle." Minister Yi smiled and said, "Not at all. This official is deeply gratified that Li has such a good friend as Miss Murong." "Li Miss Murong, this is Crown Prince Jinan of Xiling State, Genin of Gojoseon." Only then did the two of them turn their gazes to the young man sitting to the side. Xiling State was located in the northwest of Dechu State. Its customs were very different from Dechu State's. However, there was one interesting point. Xiling State called itself Deling, while Dechu State was called Dongchu. Dechu State, on the other hand, called itself Dechu State in Xiling. Just from the way they addressed each other, it could be seen that the relationship between the two countries was not harmonious. Crown Prince Jinan of Genin of Gojoseon was tall and straight. His facial features were deep and angular, as if they were carved by a knife. Yi Li could clearly see that his eyes were faintly dark purple. It was said that the Emperor of Xiling had brown eyes. This Crown Prince's appearance clearly showed that he was not a pure Xiling bloodline. "Greetings, Crown Prince." Even the carefree Murong Ting still showed the proper etiquette in front of a foreign envoy. Crown Prince Jinan of Genin of Gojoseon sized up the two of them without any scruples. He quickly gave up on Murong Ting and completely turned his gaze to Yi Li. After a while, he said, "The king's consort has been appointed. Miss Murong, there is no need to be so polite. This one is Lei Tengfeng." Lei was the surname of Xiling. It was good that there was no language barrier. Minister Yi looked at the imposing Crown Prince Jinan of Genin of Gojoseon in front of him, then looked at Yi Li. He coughed lightly and said, "Li, Crown Prince Jinan of Gojoseon specially came to give you a congratulatory gift." Chapter 78. Yi Li nodded and said, "Many thanks to the heir. I've troubled the heir to make this trip. I hope that the Dechu State can make the heir feel at home." Lei Tengfeng laughed loudly and said, "Of course, this little prince has admired the scenery of the Dechu State for a long time. I will definitely take a good look around. Come, bring out the gift this heir has prepared for the princess consort of Ding." Lightly clapping his hands, two men who looked like guards walked in. One of them was holding a long and narrow carved wooden box. Looking at the length and size of the box, Yi Li had a bad feeling. This gift probably wasn't a normal gift. Lei Tengfeng made a hand gesture, and the other man accepted the order and opened the wooden box. A burst of biting cold air greeted them. Minister Ye's face sank. He stood up and said in a deep voice, "Heir, what do you mean by this?" Lei Tengfeng raised his eyebrows and said in confusion, "This is the gift this little prince's father and uncle personally chose for the princess consort. Is there something wrong with it?" Minister Yi said, "My daughter's wedding is imminent. What do you mean by giving her a sword?" A sword was a lethal weapon. It was inauspicious. Inside the intricately carved wooden box was a long sword with an ancient appearance. Even though it was still in the scabbard, one could still feel the cold light and killing intent. This was clearly a peerless treasure sword that had been tempered by a sea of blood. "This is a gift that my country and my father specially found to show our sincerity." Or, does everyone here really not know the origin of this sword? Lei Tengfeng carelessly crossed his arms and looked at the people in front of him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Hearing the contempt in his tone, Mo Jingli's brows wrinkled. He stood up and looked at the sword in the box. Mu Rongting's heart moved. She looked at Yi Li with some hesitation. "This is cloud grasping." After a long time, Mo Jingli said in a deep voice. Lei Tengfeng praised, "Li King has good eyes." "That's right, this is the cloud-grasping sword. Everyone was moved. This was not an ancient sword, but its reputation was definitely not inferior to any of the legendary swords. This sword had the same name as the first prince, Mo Lan Yun. It was the weapon that Mo Lan Yun used to conquer the world. It was also the sword of Prince Ding for generations to come. This sword had followed successive princes of the kingdom, establishing Prince to gallop through the battlefields unrivaled. No one knew how many people's blood it had drunk. Until 7 years ago, when the previous Prince Ding, Mo Xiuwen, died of an illness at the border, this sword also disappeared without a trace. Countless people searched for it openly and secretly, but they could not find a trace of it. This gift was indeed of sufficient weight and sincerity. Lei Tengfeng clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Ever since I found out that the cloud-embracing sword was missing, I don't know how much effort father put into sending people everywhere to search for it. His hard work finally paid off. He found this sword in North D 1 year ago. Just in time for Prince Ding's wedding, I'll return it to you. What do you think of Princess Ding?" Minister Ye's face was a little dignified. He stood up and said to Lei Tengfeng, "I really have to thank you for such a generous gift." It was not an exaggeration to say that the cloud-embracing sword was the national treasure of Dechu State. Minister Yi did not even dare to refuse Lei Tengfeng's gift. Minister Yi could not help but secretly regret that he did not refuse the visit of Prince Ding of Genom of Gojoseon. Lei Tengfeng nodded with satisfaction. He raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "To tell you the truth, when I obtained such a treasure, I also wanted to take it for myself. However, this cloud-embracing sword seemed to have a spirit. I spent countless efforts and still could not pull it out. In the end, although I found a first-class swordsmith to pull out the sword, it was a pity that the sword did not listen to me at all. Even the #1 swordsman of West Hill could not control it. I thought that this cloud-embracing sword might only belong to the king's mansion. Therefore, I wanted to invite Princess Ding to test the sword." Minister Yi said unhappily, "My daughter does not know swordsmanship. Besides, if Prince Ding wants to test the sword, you should find Prince Ding." Lei Tengfeng looked at Yi Li and said with a smile, "Is Princess Ding not a member of the king's mansion? It is said that 100 years ago, the first Princess Ding had killed 16 enemies with this sword and saved Prince Ding's life. Since then, it has been passed down as a much-told story. It can be seen that this sword does not need the bloodline of the king's mansion. It can be matched with Prince Ding's partner. What do you think, Princess Ding?" Before Yi Li opened her mouth, Mo Jingli snorted and said, "Infanta Qing Yun is a peerless woman with both pen and sword. It is not surprising that she can use the cloud-embracing sword. Prince Genom of Gojoseon wants Yi Li to use the cloud-embracing sword. Are you deliberately making things difficult for my Dechu state? Who doesn't know that Yi Li can't even perform a complete set of swordsmanship?" Lei Tengfeng smiled. This prince believes in the judgment of the Ding king's household. Throughout the history of the Ding king's concubines, not a single one of them was not a stunning woman. Mo Jingli mocked. "This generation is an exception." Murong Ting said unjustly, "Prince Shannan, you want a woman who has never practiced martial arts to perform with a sword that you can't even pull out? Does West Hill like to force people to do things? Is it forcing people to do things? Why don't you ask Princess Ding? Father ordered that this sword must be given to Princess Ding. Is it possible that I can only bring it back to West Hill?" This was already a threat. Lei Tengfeng's meaning was obvious. If the future Princess Ding couldn't pull out the cloud-embracing sword and couldn't control it, then don't blame him for bringing the sword back to West Hill. If that was the case, not to mention Great Chu's face, even its foundation would be lost. "Third sister, why don't you try? Maybe you can pull it out." Yi Ying said softly, "Prince Shannan of West Hill has given us such a valuable gift. If we don't accept it, won't we be rude to the neighboring country?" Minister Yi frowned and glanced at Yi Ying. He was thinking about whether Yi Li's refusal to pull out the sword or her inability to pull it out was more embarrassing. "Prince Ding has arrived." An announcement was made outside the door. Mo Xiaoyao appeared at the gate with Jin. Everyone present secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Murong Ting secretly winked at Yili. Leightonfeng, who had been sitting in the chair casually, sat up straight the moment Mo Xiaoyao came in. His eyes swept over Mo Xiaoyao's calm and gentle face like a knife. Then he turned his head to look at Yili. Yili laughed in her heart. This prince was probably evaluating whether the cloud-embracing sword was more important in Mo Xiaoyao's heart or her, his fiancée. Why did Mo Xiaoyao come? Greetings to Prince Ding. I, Leightonfeng, have heard a lot about you. Leightonfeng stood up and smiled. Prince Ding is too polite. I had the honor of seeing Genin King of Gojoseon when I was young. We haven't seen each other for many years. I'm sure Prince's style is still the same. Mo Xiaoyao lightly nodded in return. Leightonfei's eyes twitched. He quickly smiled and said, Father is in good health. He often talks to me about Prince's style in the past. He hopes that I can imitate him. Mo Xiaoyao's expression didn't change. He calmly said, Prince is too kind. Now that I've seen Prince Ding, I know that Genin King of Gojoseon has a successor. Seeing the two men in front of her chatting warmly in this tense atmosphere, Yili inexplicably wanted to laugh. She didn't know who it was that said diplomacy was a very feminine activity. After the greetings, Mo Xiaoyao moved his wheelchair to Yili's side. He softly said, Li is in a good mood. Yili lightly smiled and said, Genin King of Gojoseon sent a very precious gift. It just so happens that Prince is also here. How about we share it? Mo Xiaoyao smiled and nodded. His gaze fell on the embracing cloud sword in the box. His gaze was calm and without any ripples. It was as if there really was an ordinary sword in the box. He turned to Leightonfeng and said, Your Majesty and Prince have troubled you. This sword has been lost for many years. I didn't expect to see it again today. Leightonfeng raised his eyebrows and said, The embracing cloud sword is De Chu State's most precious treasure. It should be returned intact. I just don't know if I'll be able to see the glory of this famous sword. Chapter 79. Jin. Jin stepped forward and took the sword from the West Hill Guard's hands. She carefully carried it to Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao took it with one hand. He raised his head and asked, What do you think, Miss Li? Yili lowered her head and reached out to touch the ancient scabbard. She nodded and said, Although I don't know this, I know it is a good sword. Yili was indeed not familiar with the way of the sword. The only swords she had seen in her previous life were the taiji swords played by grandpas and grandmas in the park. On the modern battlefield, swords were not even used for cold weapons. Instead, short knives, daggers, and ame daggers were more suitable for close combat. Yili slowly grasped the sword hilt. She was not in a hurry to pull it out. If this sword was really as difficult to pull out and control as Leightonfeng had described, then the scabbard and the sword blade must have some kind of mechanism. Mo Xiaoyao smiled as he covered Yili's hand with his and raised the sword blade with his other hand. Under everyone's gaze, Yili acutely sensed Mo Xiaoyao's hand move slightly and then pull it out. A cold light flashed and the sword roared like a dragon. The entire hall seemed to freeze, but it was only for a moment. Yili quickly sensed the majestic fighting spirit and overwhelming killing intent from the sword blade. This was a dangerous aura that only those who had been on the battlefield could sense. Unknowingly, Mo Xiaoyao had already let go of her. Yili waved her sword to the side and the ancient painting on the wall not far away cracked. Good sword. Yili sighed in admiration. She could cut the ancient painting with the sharpness of the sword blade. It was not an exaggeration to say that she could even cut a strand of hair. Holding the sword steadily, Yili calmly looked at Leightonfeng, who was staring at her. Before anyone could react, Mo Xiaoyao had already taken the cloud-embracing sword from Yili and sheathed it. Lei Tengkong looked at the ancient painting on the wall that only had half of it left. After a long while, he let out a sigh and said, "It's indeed a good sword." As for whether Yili could control this sword or not, no one cared anymore, because she had already pulled out the incomparably sharp sword in her hand. Third young Mistress Yi did not have the strength to truss a chicken. It was enough for her to be able to hold the sword firmly. If she was forced to practice the sword, even the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon, who came with hostility, would be embarrassed to ask. Facing such a situation, Minister Yi stroked his beautiful beard with satisfaction, and his face was full of smiles. The daughter of the Yi family had helped the Chu state retrieve a long-lost treasure. Moreover, she had brought the cloud-embracing sword as her dowry. What a great honor that would be! Yili sighed in her heart. If this sword was placed in the Yi residence, the roof of the Yi family would be trampled flat. She didn't believe that Lei Tengfeng would just let go of such a precious gift without saying a word, and yet, she couldn't refuse to accept it. Crown Prince, this sword. Yili smiled faintly as she looked at the somewhat absent-minded Lei Tengfeng in front of her. Lei Tengfeng stared at the woman in front of him, and then looked at Mo Xiuyao sitting next to her. He smiled and said, "This sword is naturally a congratulatory gift for the Crown Princess. This little prince also wishes the two of you 100 years of happiness and a long life together." Mo Xiuyao said, "Then, I accept Crown Prince's auspicious words." Lei Tengfeng stood and said to everyone, "The gift has been delivered. This little prince will leave first. I will come and disturb Prince on the day of the wedding. Take care, I won't send you off." After sending off Genom of Gojoseon Crown Prince, Murong-ting stared at the cloud-embracing sword in Jin's hands. Her eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and she even forgot to pull on Yili's sleeve. Li. Cloud-embracing sword, it's really the cloud-embracing sword, can I touch it? Yili helplessly looked at her envious expression and turned to look at Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao slightly raised his eyebrows, "No matter. Since it's for you, it will naturally belong to Li in the future." Yili looked at him and said, "I thought this was the Crown Prince's heirloom." Now it seemed like it wasn't that important. Murong-ting did not care about this. She cheered and rushed over to snatch the sword from Jin's hands. She held it in her hands and touched it left and right. Mo Xiuyao nodded. After being passed down for so many years, of course it was an heirloom. If it could be passed down for another 1,000 years, it would not be worse than those heirlooms like Ganjiang and Moxie. Murong-ting lovingly caressed the sword and said, "In fact, it is said that the cloud-embracing sword contains the Crown Prince's military books and treasures. Of course, this is not important. What is important is that this is the sword that every Crown Prince of the Crown Prince has used. To be able to touch it is really a great fortune. My father must be so envious of me." Yili raised her eyebrows. It turned out that chasing after idols was something that existed in every generation. Military books? Treasures? Is this sword really still intact? The West Hill should have taken it apart and examined it from the inside out. Mo Xiuyao looked at the sword in Murong-ting's hands and a trace of warmth flashed through his eyes. He said indifferently, "They have indeed seen it. The sword itself is not damaged." So, Murong-ting forgot who the person in front of her was. Her eyes widened as she waited for Mo Xiuyao to reveal the mystery. Mo Xiuyao looked at Yili and smiled, "So this is a sword. It is good that we can find it. After all, it is an item left behind by our ancestor. If we can't find it, we can just find a master swordsmith to forge another one. Then what about the military books? The treasures?" Murong-ting asked in disappointment. Mo Xiuyao looked at everyone indifferently. "The cloud-embracing sword was forged when our ancestor was 16 years old. It cost all of our ancestors' savings. Where did the treasures and military books come from?" Everyone was speechless. The people of the world only remembered that the cloud-embracing sword had followed Mo Lanyun his entire life. It was also the sword that every crown prince Ding carried with him. They guessed that there must be some secret behind it. However, they forgot that the cloud-embracing sword was forged by Mo Lanyun when he was young. At that time, Mo Lanyun was only a wild and unruly youth of an aristocratic family. Compared to the Prince Ding who helped his elder brother conquer the world 20 years later, he could not be mentioned in the same breath. Even Minister Yi, a scholar who did not know much about the cloud-embracing sword, could not help but be disappointed. If the cloud-embracing sword was so important, who would carry it with them? How could it be lost so easily? Li, I'm going back first. Can you send a few more people over? Yi Li nodded. She took the cloud-embracing sword from Murongting's hands and threw it to a Jin. You should take the cloud-embracing sword back to the Ding King Palace. It's not convenient to leave it here. She had no interest in letting others step on her roof every day. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. That's good too. Seeing the cloud-embracing sword disappear outside the door, Murongting reluctantly withdrew her gaze. Mo Jingli stared at Yi Li suspiciously. You really believe that the cloud-embracing sword has no secrets? Yi Li naturally nodded. If I had military books and treasures, I wouldn't put them in a sword. As a commonly used sword that needed to be carried around, it was very famous and it was not a small sword. It was not a good thing to hide secrets. You vulgar people. That was Prince Ding's relic. Relic ah. Murongting resentfully despised the vulgar people in the hall. After Murongting despised the group of vulgar people, she held her hand that had touched Prince Ding's relic and admired herself. Minister Yi was in a happy mood as he greatly praised Yi Li. He could almost foresee what kind of reputation and glory it would bring to the Yi family when the news of Yi Li marrying the cloud-embracing sword was spread out. As for whether there were treasures or military books in the cloud-embracing sword, that was secondary. Minister Yi still had some self-awareness. Even if there were treasures, he would not have any part in it. In comparison, the reputation that did not need to pay any price at all was more meaningful. Chapter 80. Third sister is really fortunate. Prince Ding rushed over so quickly after hearing the news of heir Genom of Gojoseon's visit. It can be seen that he has deep feelings for third sister. Yi Ying looked at Yi Li with her watery eyes and said faintly. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, fourth sister and Prince Li are also deeply in love, aren't they? Yi Ying quickly glanced at Mo Jingli and lowered her head with an aggrieved expression. Seeing this, Minister Yi frowned slightly. Could it be that was really wronged in Prince Li's residence? Thinking of this, Minister Yi casually looked at Mo Jingli and asked Yi Ying warmly, are you used to Prince Li's residence these days? Is doing well. Thank you for your concern, father. Yi Ying lowered her eyes and said softly. Minister Yi was relieved and smiled at Mo Jingli. Has been spoiled since she was young. If she has done anything wrong, Prince, please forgive her. Mo Jingli said, father-in-law, don't worry. I will take good care of That's good. Li, will be getting married in a few days. This year our Yi family can be said to have double happiness. Minister Yi smiled with satisfaction. The three people present had different expressions. Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded, father is right. May 20th Li was pulled up early before dawn. Although she always went to bed early and woke up early, looking at the dark night outside, Yi Li still felt a little helpless. The time to escort the bride was a little before noon, but she had to get up in the middle of the night to be manipulated. After taking a fragrant petal bath with the help of the maidservants, second aunt, first madam of Duke Hua's residence, Qin Zheng's mother, Madame Qin, and Aunt Yi who helped Yi Li prepare the dowry were already waiting in Qin Yi Pavilion with Murongting, Hua Tianxiang, Qin Zheng, and Qin Yuling. Hua Tianxiang walked in with a smile on her face holding a phoenix brocade wedding dress. The glittering phoenix brocade made her delicate face even more beautiful. Congratulations. Looking at Yi Li with a smile, Hua Tianxiang smiled silently. Yili smiled faintly and raised her hand like a puppet, allowing the few people to help her put on the wedding dress. Under the candlelight, the noble phoenix flowed with the light, faintly discernible among the delicate peonies. Against the bright red wedding dress, Yili's beautiful face, which was usually a little pale, had a little more joy. So beautiful, worthy of the phoenix brocade. Murmuring softly, everyone was a little stunned. Madame Hua looked at Madame Su, who was looking at Yili with a gratified smile, and had a deeper understanding of third Miss Ye's position in the Su family. Patting her daughter who was in a daze, she said with a smile, "Well, stand aside if you want to admire. Don't disturb us." Without any explanation, she pulled Yili to sit in front of the bronze mirror and discussed what hairstyle to use with Madame Su and Madame Qin. Yili looked at the mirror speechlessly and let them do whatever they wanted. At the same time, she enjoyed the way Murong Ting pulled a few girls to the side and winked at her. By the time the madams, each with their own opinions, finally finished discussing the issue of hairstyles, the sky outside had already turned a little white. Yili couldn't help but look at the sky in her heart. She finally understood why they had to start preparing so early. If they started preparing at dawn, it was estimated that they wouldn't be ready by the time the bridegroom came. After tidying up the hair, a few maids had cleverly brought several sets of head ornaments and jewelry that had been prepared before. Madame Hua wasn't in a hurry to put the hairpin on Yili's head. She smiled and instructed the maidservant, "Quickly go and get some food for your young miss to fill her stomach. After the makeup is done, she won't be able to eat anything today." Qing Shuang made a face and smiled as she pulled Qing Yu to prepare the food. The madams also went outside to rest for a while. As soon as the adults left, the rest of the children immediately surrounded Yili. "How is it, Yili? Are you nervous?" Murong Ting leaned on the table and asked curiously with her chin in her hand. Yili pursed her lips and smiled, "You don't know if I'm nervous or not. In the future, I'll see if you're nervous or not." Murong Ting's face turned red. She gritted her teeth and said, "I won't be nervous." Hua Tianxiang looked at her with a smile, "You're stuttering. How dare you say you're not nervous? You're definitely more nervous than Yili." "Ah, the next one is Zheng Er. Zheng Er needs to be prepared." Qin Zheng glared at Hua Tianxiang angrily. She whispered with a red face, "Why are you talking about me?" Qin Zheng's shy appearance made Yili reach out and pinch her little face. She smiled and said, "What Tianxiang said makes sense, future cousin-in-law. You, Li, you're getting married today. Why are you? Qin Zheng looked helplessly at her good sisters who were laughing together and Qin Yuling who was hiding on the side and laughing secretly. The person who should be shy didn't express anything. Instead, she, who had nothing to do with it, was shy and embarrassed. Hua Tianxiang wiped her tears and said with a smile, "Good Zheng Er, don't be angry. She's a strange person. Don't expect her to be shy." Looking back at Yili, Hua Tianxiang nodded with satisfaction and said, "Our Li Er is really a great beauty." Yili only felt black lines on her forehead. "You're not trying to say that clothes make the person, are you? How can that be? It's just that you usually don't pay attention to your appearance. Look at you now. Even without jewelry or decorations, you're still shining." Hee. Prince Ding will definitely be stunned. Yili shrugged and didn't say anything. If Mo Xiuyao didn't like a beauty like noble consort Lu, it was hard to imagine what kind of beauty he would be stunned by. Qing Shuang and the others brought in some light breakfast. After eating and resting for a while, the madams came in again to choose accessories and makeup. Because they couldn't try on the wedding dress and couldn't have a second one, even the accessories, hairstyle, and makeup could only be decided according to the effect of the wedding dress after putting on the dress. So, they prepared 3 sets of jewelry in advance. In the end, the madams unanimously chose a set of golden silk peonies with tassels inlaid with rubies and a few jeweled gold hairpins. Then they drew their eyebrows and put on some light rouge. Madame Qin ingeniously drew a small half-open peony between her eyebrows. Yi Li was a bit lost in thought as she looked at the beautiful woman in the bronze mirror. For a moment, she almost didn't recognize herself. Her beautiful black hair was tied into an elegant bun. The tassels inlaid with gemstones swayed gently under the candlelight, adding a charm to the dignified and noble red wedding dress. Yi Li smiled faintly in her heart. She had never thought that the words charming and delicate would be related to her. So beautiful. Li, you're also stunned, aren't you? Hua Tianxiang teased. Yi Li glared at her. Madame Hua had already pushed the girls out with a smile. All right, everyone go out first. Let the bride rest for a while, the bridegroom should be here soon. The crowd once again congratulated Yi Li before leaving happily. Only Madame Su was left behind. When Madame Su handed her a thin booklet with a smile on her face and instructed her to read it carefully, Yi Li could only stare at the booklet in front of her in a daze. She didn't need to think to know what was inside. After thinking about it, Yi Li stood up and put the booklet in a box that she didn't use much. Chapter 81. King Ding's mansion was obviously much more reliable than King Li's mansion. Qing Yishuan was bustling with noise and excitement when it was only 8:45. Madame Hua and Madame Qin personally covered Yi Li's head with a phoenix brocade veil and helped her to pay her respects to old Madame Yi, Minister Yi, and Madame Su's memorial tablets. In this wedding, the most eye-catching thing was naturally the groom, who was originally expected to appear, but absolutely unexpected. A long time ago, many people had secretly guessed who the king's mansion would invite to escort the bride, but no one thought that Prince Ding would come in person. The road from the gate of Ye's mansion to King Ding's mansion was already full of people in the capital who came to watch the fun. Seeing Prince Ding, who was dressed in red, appearing in front of everyone, the commoners couldn't help but recall the young man dressed in embroidered clothes who had galloped on his horse and brandished his whip. They sighed in their hearts. Similarly, the extravagance of Ye's mansion was also extraordinary. Originally, Yi Rong, the only son of the Yi family, should send his sister out, but it was completely different from when Yi Ying got married. Outside the gate of Ye's mansion, 6 handsome and extraordinary men with different characteristics appeared. The leaders were naturally Su Qingchen and Su Qingze, followed by Su Qingfeng and Su Qingbai, and finally Su Qingyan and Yi Rong. The young masters of the Su family were either gentle and elegant, cold and dignified, valiant, or handsome. Even the youngest, Su Qingyan, was smart and candid. Yi Rong was immediately ignored by everyone. She could only follow Su Qingyan silently. The bride walked out of the gate with the help of Hua Tianxiang and Qin Zheng. The phoenix brocade wedding dress shone brightly in the sun and attracted people's amazement again. This day was undoubtedly the busiest day in the capital. It was unknown whether it was because of the status of King Ding's mansion or because the guests who came to attend this wedding were too special. Even the emperor brought the empress and empress dowager to attend the wedding in person. They attended the wedding instead of presiding over the wedding, because the one presiding over the wedding this time was Great Elder Princess Shifu, who even the emperor had to respectfully address as Great Elder Princess. King Ding's mansion, which had not had any guests for 7 or 8 years, was full of guests. Great Elder Princess sat high on the throne and chatted with the guests who came to congratulate her. Mo Jingqi and the Empress sat beside Great Elder Princess and talked with her. Although Great Elder Princess had not been involved in worldly affairs for more than 20 years, her dignity as the iron-fisted princess, who was respected by the former emperor, was still not to be trifled with. Your Majesty, Great Elder Princess, the auspicious time has arrived. The chief steward of the Wang mansion came in to report, and all the guests in the hall fell silent. Mo Jingqi looked at the gray-haired Great Elder Princess who was still in high spirits and said with a smile, "In that case, salute me." Imperial Grand Aunt? Shifu Great Elder Princess nodded. She stood up and said to everyone, "Your Majesty, Empress Dowager, and all the guests, please come with I to watch the ceremony." The auditorium located in the main hall of the prince's mansion had already been properly decorated. Red candles burned high, creating a joyous atmosphere. Great elder princess sat high on the main seat, with the emperor and empress dowager sitting on her left and right sides. The rest of the guests were seated according to their respective statuses. Under everyone's gaze, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili walked into the auditorium surrounded by bridesmaids. They were supposed to be a match made in heaven, but the groom could only sit in a wheelchair, which made many people feel sorry. At the same time, there were even more people who were sighing. If Prince Ding was not in his current state, he would have already married a talented and beautiful woman as his wife. Why would he only marry an unknown daughter from the minister's residence? Prince Ding's legs are inconvenient. Don't you lack sincerity by saluting like this? A joking voice suddenly sounded in the hall, as if a basin of ice water was suddenly poured into a blazing fire. The whole wedding hall suddenly fell silent. Everyone looked at the source of the voice in surprise. Sitting there were the envoys of various countries who came to watch the ceremony. Among them, a strong young man was staring at Mo Xiaoyao with a complacent face. Obviously, the words just now came from his mouth. He clearly did not feel that he was rude. When he saw everyone's gaze converging on him, he became even more presumptuous. That is the 11th prince of the northern tribes. I heard that he is an idiot. Why would the king of the northern tribes send him to the Chu state? Yili stood quietly beside Mo Xiaoyao, hearing the guests' whispers. Have you forgotten that the northern tribes and King Ding's manor can be said to have a deep hatred as deep as the sea? Even though they have reconciled with our great Chu these few years, I'm afraid that they still hold a grudge over the past and purposely sent this idiot here to embarrass King Ding. How can the emperor allow such a person to attend the ceremony? He is the envoy of a country. He came from so far away, how can we not let him attend the ceremony? Amidst the discussions, Mo Jingqi looked down and said to the prince of the northern tribes in a clear voice, 11th prince, our Chu state's wedding does not have a kneeling ceremony, so there is nothing inconvenient for Prince Ding. However, the prince of the northern tribes clearly did not intend to name the emperor of the Chu state. He furrowed his thick brows and said unhappily in a loud voice, I have heard of the reputation of the Chu state's Prince Ding when I was in the northern tribes. Who would have thought that I would see a cripple in a wheelchair today? Is the Chu state's emperor trying to fool us? When these words came out, not only Mo Jingqi, but all the officials of the Chu state present changed their expressions. Sitting beside the prince of the northern tribes, Lei Tengfeng, the crown prince of Shiling Genom of Gojoseon, coughed lightly and said with a smile, 11th prince, this is indeed the Chu state's Prince Ding. However, Prince Ding met with an accident 7 years ago. Today, we are here to attend the ceremony, not to make a scene. Come, let this prince toast you. The northern tribes were barbarians, and this 11th prince was considered a hooligan among them. How could he give up just because Lei Tengfeng urged him to drink? He glanced at Mo Xiaoyao and chuckled. I remember now. Prince Ding's injury seems to have been caused by our northern tribe's winged cavalry general. In the past, I always heard the winged cavalry general lamenting to I that he was so close to being captured. Enough. Princess Shifu was so angry that her face had turned black. She no longer cared that the prince of the northern tribes was an envoy from another country. She said coldly, if the prince of the northern tribes is here to attend the ceremony, then sit quietly. If not, get out. The prince of the northern tribes was stunned. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something to great elder princess. But he was quickly pressed back by the two people beside him. Although the prince of the northern tribes was displeased, he didn't say anything in the end. Others saw great elder princess's angry face and didn't dare to say anything. Mo Jingqi coughed softly and said, Princess, it's time to salute. Princess Shifu's eyes darkened and she nodded to the official who was in charge of the ceremony. First, bow to heaven and earth. Second, bow to your parents. Husband and wife, bow to each other. Under the red bridal veil, Yili slightly turned her eyes and saw the person beside her holding the red silk tightly. She could only sigh in her heart. In fact, since she knew Mo Xiaoyao until now, she always felt that Mo Xiaoyao was too perfect to be real. As a person who was crippled, disfigured, and said to be in poor health, his performance was too perfect. He didn't feel inferior, nor did he feel sorry for himself, nor did he give up on himself. No matter when he stood up, even if he was sitting in a wheelchair, he seemed to be taller than anyone else. Thinking back to the rumor about the fiery young man, Mo Xiaoyao was even more illusory and ethereal. What kind of painful tempering did he have to go through from being as fiery as fire to being as gentle as jade? Until now, Yili really felt a trace of Mo Xiaoyao's emotions, anger and murderous intent. Chapter 82. Yili smiled bitterly. It was her wedding, but she could feel her husband's negative emotions in the hall. Even if it wasn't directed at her, it still made her feel a little depressed. The ceremony is complete. Send them to the bridal chamber. In the festive red bridal chamber, the dragon and phoenix candles burned quietly. Yili sat quietly on the new bed that was embroidered with dragons and phoenixes, speechless. She knew that Mo Xiaoyao was sitting not far from the bed and looking at her, but he didn't seem to have any intention of coming forward. Can I take this off? She couldn't wait for the groom to do it, so she could only ask herself. After a while, Mo Xiaoyao slowly walked forward. His eyes lit up as the veil on her head was removed. The two of them were stunned when they saw each other. Yili was used to Mo Xiaoyao's plain clothes, so she wasn't used to seeing him in a bright red robe. But, this man didn't seem to be ugly no matter what color he wore. Mo Xiaoyao was only dazed for a moment. A trace of surprise flashed through his calm eyes, but it immediately disappeared without a trace. The two of them looked at each other in silence for a moment, feeling a little restrained. Yili leaned forward and pulled Mo Xiaoyao's left hand. Mo Xiaoyao was stunned and immediately wanted to pull back his clenched fist. Let go. Yili said lightly. His fingers gradually loosened. His broad hand didn't look like a pampered noble's. There were many calluses and scars on it, but it didn't look hideous. Yili remembered that one of her childhood friends had once told her what a man's hand should look like. There should be some calluses, which meant that this man wasn't someone who didn't do any household chores. There might even be one or two unsightly scars, which meant that this man wasn't someone who was raised in a boudoir. It would be best if it looked good. Only this kind of hand could make a woman feel safe and pleasing to the eye. At this moment, the palm of his hand was stained with a shocking scarlet. For deep wounds were still slowly bleeding, but the man opposite her seemed to feel no pain at all. He opened his hand and allowed her to see. Yili lowered her head to look at his scarred palm. She reached out a finger and gently touched it. Then, she pressed down hard. She raised her head and looked at the man whose expression did not change at all. Doesn't it hurt? Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. He looked at Yili with a warm gaze. What kind of pain is this? I've been through worse. Yili agreed. For someone who had been on the battlefield, this kind of injury was nothing. She stood up and walked to the side, rummaging through her dowry to find a familiar small box and carried it back. She sat by the bed and opened the box. She took out clean white cotton gauze and medicine and applied it on him. Even if you're angry, you don't have to hurt yourself, right? I thought you were used to it. Mo Xiaoyao smiled bitterly. You saw it. I'm not used to it yet. He also thought that he was used to it. In reality, he had used 7 whole years to get used to it. He was used to not being able to ride a horse and gallop on the battlefield. He was used to having to wear a mask in front of others. Otherwise, the scars on his face would attract fearful and sympathetic gazes. He was used to being seriously ill from time to time. His life in the past was like a dream. He always thought that he was used to it well. But today, standing in the hall and listening to the prince of the northern tribes humiliate him, he realized that he was still far from it. So today, not only did he humiliate himself, he also humiliated his new wife, even though his wife did not blame him. Yili clearly saw the guilt in the man's eyes and couldn't help but smile faintly. I thought you knew that we would accept this marriage and I had already made preparations. Mo Xiuyao asked, you knew that this would happen? Yili shook her head and smiled, even if this didn't happen, there would be other situations. Do you think I can expect to live a peaceful and happy life after getting married? Even a normal family would have its own problems, let alone a noble family like this. Mo Xiuyao looked at her quietly. After a long time, he said softly, maybe I can't guarantee that you will live a carefree life. But as long as it's me, I will do my best to give you the life you want. Yili raised her eyebrows. I believe you. After applying the medicine, Yili put it away and smiled. You've been tired. You should rest early. Mo Xiuyao looked at Yili and said. Yili was stunned, but soon smiled again. Okay, you should also rest early. Mo Xiuyao nodded and asked Jin to push him away. He thoughtfully asked Qing Shuang and others who were waiting outside to serve him. When Qing Shuang and others came in, Yili had taken off her jewelry and put it in the jewelry box on the dressing table. Qing Shuang frowned and said with some dissatisfaction, Miss, why did Prince leave? Princess Sifu Great Elder Princess said on the spot that Prince Ding was not allowed to disturb the bridal chamber and did not need Prince Ding to drink with the guests. So now Prince Ding should be in the bridal chamber with Mississippi. Why did he come and leave? Yili looked back and said with a smile, this is the Prince Ding mansion. Are you afraid that he has no place to rest? Qing Wan and Qing Yu prepared warm water and asked Yili to take a bath. Their expressions were not very good. Yili did not have time to care about whether the maid's expressions were good or not. In fact, in her opinion, Mo Xiuyao's decision was too considerate. Although she did not intend to be his wife in name for the rest of her life, she was really worried about whether she could adapt to do something with a man she was not familiar with and had only met a few times. At this point, she felt that she should admire the adaptability of ancient women. Usually, she could not even hold hands with a man. When it came to marriage, she had to roll in the sheets with a man she had never met. Taking off the heavy jewelry and gorgeous wedding dress, Yili relaxed her body with satisfaction and prepared to take a bath and rest. Until she lay on the soft and comfortable bed and fell asleep, there was still a faint smile on her lips. Mother, grandfather, father, mother, and a large group of cousins, I married myself, somewhere in the study room of the Ding King mansion. Mo Xiuyao, who had already changed into plain clothes, sat behind the desk with a rarely seen gloomy and cold expression. Feng Zhiyao, who was dressed in red, lazily leaned against the door and said with a smile, why are you showing such an expression on the day of your wedding? Aren't you afraid of scaring sister-in-law? In the corner of the room sat a hedonistic youth. He looked at him with a smile and said, in my opinion, sister-in-law's courage is much bigger than what we imagined. Feng Zhiyao thought for a while and nodded in agreement, that's right. I really haven't seen many women with the guts of third Miss Yi. Have you said enough? Mo Xiuyao raised his head and looked coldly at the two people who were not serious. Feng Zhiyao shrugged his shoulders and said, tonight, that idiot is the 11th prince of the northern tribes, Yelu Ping. He is the son of the king of the northern tribe's most beloved concubine Xiao and the younger brother of the 7th prince of the northern tribes, Yelu Yi. He is also the nephew of the northern tribe's winged cavalry great general, Helian Zhen. You can't have forgotten what you did to Helian Zhen 7 years ago, right? Helian Zhen's surname is Helian and concubine Zhao's surname is Xiao. How can Yelu Ping be Helian Zhen's nephew? The hedonistic youth asked in confusion. Chapter 83. The relationship between the northern tribes is so messy that it gives people a headache. Who knows how they got involved? Feng Zhiyao said unhappily, Leng Haoyu, shouldn't this be your problem? The young man was the second son of the northern general, Leng Haoyu, who was said to be the most disappointing person in the capital. I received news from the northern tribes that Yelu Yi is Helianzhen's illegitimate son. Can this kind of news that has already spread to the Chu state be trusted? Feng Zhiyao rolled his eyes and looked back at Mo Xiuyao. 7 years ago, your eldest brother suddenly died of illness. Originally, Helianzhen could have taken the opportunity to establish unparalleled achievements and even sweep through the Chu state. In the end, because you killed your way out of Ghost Sorrow Valley, a fire almost burned half of Helianzhen's life. Not only did Helianzhen lose soldiers, but the northern tribes also didn't dare to send troops for 3 whole years. By the time they recover, our great Chu will have recovered as well. From then on, Helianzhen fell out of favor with the king of the northern tribes. This also caused Yelu Yi and concubine Zhao's influence in the northern tribes to be greatly reduced. It's already good that they didn't directly rush to the Chu state to fight with you. Mo Xiuyao said indifferently, in other words, Yelu Ping was sent by Yelu Yi to embarrass I. Feng Zhiyao rubbed his chin and said, everyone knows that Yelu Ping is a hooligan. He offended you and you were too embarrassed to argue with him. Isn't the result obvious? Mo Xiuyao sneered, today, they are still considered polite. Only Yelu Ping jumped out to cause trouble. The others are also impatient, right? Feng Zhiyao knocked his forehead and thought for a while, who knew that our emperor would bring the empress and empress dowager to Ding King's estate. It's not good to be too rude in front of his majesty, right? Since a fool has already stepped out, those who claim to be smart naturally won't speak anymore. However, the envoys from each country will stay in the capital for half a month. As for sister-in-law, don't disturb her. Mo Xiuyao said calmly. Feng Zhiyao and Leng Haoyu looked at each other. Leng Haoyu blinked his peach blossom eyes and asked, Prince, don't tell us that the new princess you married is planning to hide her in the Prince Ding mansion and not let anyone see her. Could it be that the third miss of the Yi family was so charming that His Highness Prince Ding fell in love with her at first sight and wanted to carefully hide and protect her when they met again? Mo Xiuyao said, Miss Li doesn't like to socialize with the rich and powerful. If there's nothing important, don't bother her. Feng Zhiyao tapped the folding fan in his hand and frowned. Ah Yao, even if an ordinary family marries a wife, they have to take charge of the inner court and make connections. Moreover, she was the mistress of the Ding Palace. If she was a lady from a respectable family without any ability, then so be it. However, third young Mistress Yi was not a weak and incompetent woman. If she can help you, it will naturally be twice the result with half the effort. You will also be able to relax a lot. Feng San is right. Ting praises third young Mistress Yi a lot. Leng Haoyu agreed. Mo Xiuyao frowned and said, we'll talk about this later. Feng Zhiyao raised his eyebrows slightly. It was unknown what he thought of, but he suddenly smiled and said, all right, since you've already decided, we won't bother about this matter. What does the emperor mean by personally bringing the Empress Dowager over today? Is he still guarding against you? Mo Xiuyao said, when did he not guard against me? Now, the cloud-embracing sword has returned to the Ding Palace. In the past few days, there have been at least a dozen groups of people trying to break into the Ding Palace. At least 3 of them came from the palace. Leng Haoyu's eyes lit up. Are they His Majesty's people? Mo Xiuyao shook his head. I'm not sure, but there are definitely some of his people. Feng Zhiyao looked at Leng Haoyu with a smile and said, Leng Heir, go back and keep an eye on your family's cold-faced general. If His Majesty keeps failing to break into the palace, he will most likely send you over. Who told him to be His Majesty's most trusted aide who grew up with him since he was young? Leng Haoyu curled his lips and said, don't worry. No matter who comes, they won't be able to bring a single strand of hair out of this palace. Thinking of his cold-faced big brother, Leng Haoyu, he was filled with displeasure. He was a self-righteous fool who only knew how to follow the emperor. But every time Ting saw him, she would have an expression of admiration. When she saw him, it was as if she was looking at trash. He was really unhappy. That guy better come and break into the palace. If he was caught and beaten up, Ting would know who was the heroic and extraordinary one, and who was the hedonistic fool. Prince, someone broke into the palace. The heavy stone door opened a crack and Jean quickly rushed in. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes turned cold. Where did they go? Wang Fei's courtyard. Pa! Don't let a single one go. Since today's wedding is not suitable to see blood, then we'll entertain them tomorrow. Early in the morning, Yili leisurely sat in front of the bronze mirror. Qing Shuang and Qing Xia helped her take care of her hair. Qing Shuang deftly tied her black hair into a lily bun. Qing Xia held out a jewelry box filled with jewels for Yili to choose. Yili helplessly looked left and right in front of the bronze mirror. She frowned and looked at Qing Shuang. Can't you have a simpler one? Qing Shuang snickered. Young miss, you should be content. A newly married woman should dress up well. Qing Shuang has already chosen the simplest hairstyle. If it was the hairstyle popular among the noble ladies in the capital, you wouldn't be able to stand it. In the past, those hairstyles were for young ladies. Now that you're married, you can't use them anymore. Let's use the set of jewelry that Prince gave young miss before. Young miss hasn't used it yet. Yili nodded. She did like that set of green magnolia jewelry very much. It didn't look too ostentatious. Qing Xia pressed her lips together with a smile. She took Yili's jewelry and helped Yili put it on. She nodded and praised. Qing Shuang understands young miss the best. What young miss? Lin Mama and Wei Mama came in. Lin Mama glared at the servant girls and said, from now on, you have to call her Wang Fei. Don't let the people in this fu think that the Wang Fei servants don't know the rules. Yes, Mama. The 4 maidservants greet the princess. The 4 maidservants stood in a row and respectfully bowed to Yili. Wei Mama's heart ached for Yili as she asked in a soft voice. The 2 Mama naturally knew that Prince hadn't rested in the bridal chamber last night. Wei Mama couldn't help but feel sorry for the young miss that she had taken care of since she was young. Yili smiled and comforted the 2 Mama. The 2 Mama saw that Yili's face didn't have any expression of being wronged and dropped the matter. They thought that young miss had just arrived at the Ding King's fu and was not used to it yet. Prince was considerate, so he gave young miss some time to adapt. But they still hinted to Yili that it was best for her to become a real husband and wife with Prince as soon as possible. After all, they were people who would spend a lifetime together. Yili's mouth couldn't help but twitch. In the end, she didn't say anything and let them misunderstand. Prince is here. Mo Xiaoyao appeared outside the door and asked softly, Yili, may I come in? Yili responded. Mo Xiaoyao then left a jing outside the door and slid his wheelchair in. Looking at Yili, he asked, Yili, did you sleep well last night? Yili nodded with a smile, very well. Your complexion doesn't look too good. When Mo Xiaoyao came in, Lin Mama led the servant girls out. Yili regained her senses and found that there was no one to serve tea. She could only helplessly smile at Mo Xiaoyao as she walked to the table and sat down. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes did indeed have some tiredness as he waved his hand. Last night I sent some guests to rest a little late. It's not a problem. Chapter 84. Should we greet great elder princess first? And eldest sister-in-law. Mo Xiaoyao was the only direct descendant in Prince Ding's mansion, but there were other people. The late Prince Ding, who was also Mo Xiaoyao's elder brother, Mo Xiaowen's first wife, was still alive. However, it was said that she had been staying in the temple all year round for her husband's sake. She didn't even appear at the wedding yesterday. One of the concubines of Mo Xiaoyao's father, Mo Lufang, was also alive. In addition, Yili didn't ask how many concubines Mo Xiaoyao had. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, let's have breakfast first. Great elder princess is old and tired yesterday, so she won't get up so early. As for eldest sister-in-law. Mo Xiaoyao frowned slightly and said, since eldest brother passed away, eldest sister-in-law has been living in the Buddha hall with several concubines. Even I rarely see her. A few days ago, she sent someone to tell you that you can visit her when you come back. Yi Li nodded. She had heard about the former Princess Ding from her third brother. She was also a pitiful person. Princess Wen wasn't born in a rich and powerful family, but in an ordinary scholarly family. She married Mo Xiaowen when she was 16 and lost her husband when she was 18. Mo Xiaowen was away on an expedition when they just got married, so they didn't even have a child. Then, what do I need to do? Yi Li asked. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and said with a faint smile, besides managing the affairs in the mansion, you also need to keep some accounts. You can do whatever you like at other times. If you feel bored, you can invite your friends to visit the mansion or go out for a walk. Li, this will be your home in the future, so you don't have to be so restrained. Yi Li nodded and said, I know, but I'm not used to it. So now. Let's have breakfast first. Then I'll bring you to meet the people in the mansion. Breakfast was served in Yi Li's courtyard. The breakfast served in the Prince Ding mansion was also to Yi Li's liking. After breakfast, the head steward came in to report, Prince, the stewards are all here. I await the summons of the prince and princess consort. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and turned around to say to Yi Li, this is the butler of the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Xian. He's also Ah Jin's uncle. If you need anything in the future, just tell him directly. The steward also stepped forward and bowed, this old servant greets the princess. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, you don't have to be so courteous. I'll have to trouble you in the future. It could be seen that Mo Xiaoyao valued this steward a lot, and he was also Ah Jin's uncle. Ah Jin was always by Mo Xiaoyao's side, and could definitely be considered a trusted aide. Receiving such courteous treatment from the princess, Steward Mo wasn't shocked, but he wasn't arrogant. He still respectfully returned the greeting, this old servant doesn't dare. If the princess has any orders in the future, just tell this old servant. When the procession came to the flower hall, there were already many people standing there. Seeing Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao come in, they instantly stood up and bowed in unison, greetings to the prince, greetings to the princess. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li into the flower hall. He pointed at the main seat for her to sit before turning back to say, rise. This is the newly married princess. In the future, princess consort's words are I's thoughts. Does everyone understand? We will follow princess consort's orders. Very good. Li, this is Sun Mama. She's the steward of the Wang Fu. She's in charge of all matters in the Fu. If you have anything you don't understand, you can ask her. The mama standing at the very front was Sun Mama, who had come to the Yi Fu to deliver gifts. She was also the first person that Mo Xiaoyao had introduced to Yi Li. Thinking, Mo Xiaoyao added, Sun Mama used to be one of Mufei's people. This old servant greets princess consort. Sun Mama greets princess consort. Yi Li nodded. This is the external steward of the Wang Fu, Yang Ling. He's in charge of all external interactions. Standing next to Sun Mama was a middle-aged man in his 40s. His eyes were slightly bright. One could see that he was a very scheming person. Yang Ling greets princess consort. Yi Li frowned slightly. She didn't have any opinion on how other people addressed themselves. But it was often possible to see a person's attitude towards you from how they addressed themselves. This external steward clearly didn't have as much respect for Yi Li as Steward Mo and Sun Mama did for Yi Li. Steward Yang doesn't need to be so courteous. Then Mo Xiaoyao introduced to Yi Li several stewards who were in charge of the various businesses in the Wang Fu, as well as several more important stewards. Yi Li also had people send greeting gifts for these stewards and rewards for the servants in the Fu. Sun Mama and Steward Mo's admiration for this new princess consort grew stronger. Although the Yi family wasn't very proper, it was clear that the new princess consort had inherited Madame Ye's excellent bloodline. She knew when to advance and when to retreat. Even the gifts given to the stewards and the rewards given to the servants were carefully arranged and very appropriate. Princess consort. Jean appeared at the door. Looking at the people in the flower pavilion, he hesitated before speaking. Jean, what is it? Mo Xiaoyao asked. Jean held a long box in his hands and said, someone just sent this over, saying it's a wedding gift for princess consort. Yili raised an eyebrow, where is the person? Gone. The two exchanged a look. Mo Xiaoyao then said to Jean, bring it over. Mo Xiaoyao took it in his hands and looked. When he opened the box, there was only a scroll painting inside. Seeing that there was no problem, he handed it to Yili. Yili lowered her head to unfold the painting and couldn't help but gasp in surprise. This was a painting of a beautiful woman. Those who had never seen the painting would find it hard to imagine that there was such a beauty in the world. Her willowy eyebrows were dark without any makeup, her cherry lips were vermilion without any painting. Her exquisite and refined features were described with any compliments that made people feel like they had tarnished her. Even in the painting, one could still feel the clear water in the eyes of the young girl in the painting. The young girl in the painting was dressed in plain clothing, her hands holding a zither as she smiled amidst the flowers. Even the flowers seemed to lose their color. Bright as the sun rising at dawn, as bright as the lotus blooming, such a great beauty. Yili sighed softly. Her gaze moved to the side of the painting. On it was written, Beauty of the Chu capital. The inscription was Han Mingyue. Mo Xiaoyao also stilled. Looking at the beautiful woman in the painting, his eyes moved slightly. He quickly turned his gaze to Yili. Yili was silent for a moment. She raised her head and smiled at Mo Xiaoyao. Han Mingyue's beauty is said to be worth thousands of gold. But to send such a painting to me on the second day of the wedding, I feel ashamed. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. He looked at her and said, you are very good. Yili looked at the woman in the painting one last time. She rolled up the painting and said with some difficulty, this? Although the painting was very beautiful and very valuable, keeping it by her side was not a good idea. Even if she wasn't jealous, she didn't feel that she should keep the painting of her husband's ex-fiancé. Mo Xiaoyao said, it's for you. Yili can deal with it herself. Yili raised her eyebrows. Did he think that she would force him to deal with the painting of his ex-fiancé? She only wanted to ask him if he wanted it. If he wanted it, she would give it to him. I don't have much interest in painting. Moreover, looking at a woman who is prettier than me every day is a blow to me. Mo Xiaoyao thought for a moment. He said to Nurse Sun, change the box and bring this painting to old Su's residence. Chapter 85. Nanny Sun said respectfully, yes, Your Highness. She stepped forward to take over the painting in Yili's hand and turned around to hand it to the maid beside her to prepare. Mo Xiaoyao tilted his head and said to Yili with a smile, let's go. Great elder princess should get up. Yili nodded, got up and held Mo Xiaoyao's hand to leave with him. She didn't see the gratified look on Nanny Sun's and Director Mo's faces behind her. Who do you think sent that painting to her? Yili asked curiously as they walked to the courtyard where Great Elder Princess lived temporarily. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, that painting was originally kept in the mansion. I wanted to give it to Elder Su. But there were too many things to deal with at that time. When I came back, I didn't know where it was. Yili said with a smile, Han Mingyue's painting is priceless. Didn't you send someone to look for it? What's more, it's a real beauty. No wonder Han Mingyue dared to paint Chu Jing as a beauty. Mo Xiaoyao looked up at her and said after thinking for a moment, if you must paint, my painting is not worse than Han Mingyue's. Or I can paint one for you when I'm free. Yili was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but smile. Okay, thank you very much. Great Elder Princess had got up. As soon as they reached the door, the maid beside Great Elder Princess invited them in. Great Elder Princess was sitting on the couch and drinking tea. When she saw them come in, she immediately smiled and waved to Mo Xiaoyao, "Xiaoyao, come here and let me have a look at you." And Xiaoyao's wife, come here, come here." Mo Xiaoyao took Yili forward and saluted. Imperial Aunt. Great Elder Princess pulled Yili to sit beside her. After looking at her carefully, she nodded with satisfaction and said, "Good, good, good. You are a good daughter-in-law of King Ding's mansion. I like you very much. The emperor finally did a good thing this time. Xiaoyao should live a good life with Li. I won't teach you a lesson if you dare to mess around and make Li angry." Mo Xiaoyao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said with a wry smile, "Imperial Aunt." Yili gloated at his rare embarrassment. She covered her mouth and snickered. Great Elder Princess held Yili's hand affectionately and said, "Li, you don't know how naughty he was when he was a child. If he wasn't obedient for a day, he would go up the roof and tear down the tiles. His lord father was so angry that he almost fainted." She had become much more mature in the past few years. She had grown up and become more sensible. You two have a good life together. If you have any grievances, feel free to look for I will help you. Great Elder Princess was surprisingly easy to get along with. Perhaps because she was old and liked children, Great Elder Princess didn't look like the legendary iron-fisted princess at all. Instead, she was more like an amiable grandmother than Madame Dowager of the Yi family. Yili smiled and said, "Thank you, Imperial Aunt. Xiaoyao won't bully me." Hearing Yili's address, Great Elder Princess's eyes lit up and she was obviously happier. She held Yili's hand and talked about Mo Xiaoyao's embarrassing childhood. Mo Xiaoyao sat there with the corners of his mouth twitching, which was rare. He didn't know whether to stop her or leave. He could only sit there and listen to Great Elder Princess talking about his childhood and accept Yili's strange and teasing gaze. Great Elder Princess obviously didn't care about Mo Xiaoyao's feelings or Yili's feelings. She even directly talked about Mo Xiaoyao's childhood sweetheart, Su Yudi. Yili felt a little embarrassed, but seeing that Mo Xiaoyao didn't mean to stop Great Elder Princess, she had to listen for the time being. Great Elder Princess didn't seem to see the expressions of the two young people in front of her. She held Yili's hand and said to Mo Xiaoyao with a smile, "I have said that the girl of the Su family is not suitable for you. Now look at Li. You have to admit that I have a better taste than you. Don't you think so? Imperial Aunt." Mo Xiaoyao smiled bitterly, "Imperial Aunt, I have to take Li to pay respects to my father and mother. Do you have time to talk to Li in private?" Great Elder Princess lowered her head and thought for a while. Finally, she said, "You're right. Go and pour tea for your father and mother first. It's the right thing to write Li, into the genealogy. I will go back in a while. Li, don't forget to come and see I later." Yili said with a smile, "Can't Imperial Aunt stay for a few more days?" Great Elder Princess sighed and said, "I'm old and I'm not used to going out. After you get married, you can go to Ai's place to live more often." Since Great Elder Princess said so, the two of them naturally couldn't stay any longer. Mo Xiaoyao took Yili to burn incense to the ancestors of the Prince Ding mansion, accompanied Great Elder Princess to have lunch, and then personally sent Great Elder Princess out of King Ding's mansion. In the afternoon, Mo Xiaoyao went to the study by himself. Yili also had a lot of things to deal with, so she went back to her courtyard. Looking at King Ding's mansion, which had recovered its tranquility, Yili only felt a little like a dream. In just one day, she had moved from Ye's mansion to King Ding's mansion, got married, and became King Ding's consort. And it seemed that she had been completely used to it. Because she had just gotten married, the stewards of King Ding's mansion naturally wouldn't be so tactless as to immediately bother her with a lot of trivial account books. so Yili just needed to take care of the people in her courtyard and the dowry. Back to the courtyard, Nanny Sun was waiting there to chat with Nanny Lin and Nanny Wei. When she saw Yili come in, she hurriedly stepped forward to salute, "Princess." Yili said with a smile, "Nanny Sun is an old servant of my mother and a trusted person of Prince. You don't have to be so polite." Nanny Sun said a little cautiously, "Thank you for your kindness, Princess. I dare not overstep my boundaries. I followed the prince's instructions and chose some people to serve Princess. Princess, if you like them, you can keep them by your side." After she finished speaking, she took out a list from her sleeve and presented it. On the list, it was the people who had been assigned to Yili's courtyard. Nanny Sun continued, "There should be 4 maidservants serving Princess. In addition, there should be 2 maidservants who take care of Princess's clothing and food. There should also be 4 maidservants for sewing. There should also be 8 second-ranked maidservants serving in the courtyard. There should also be 16 little maidservants who do rough work. These second-ranked maidservants and little maidservants should be handed over to Princess's 2 nannies to handle. But the maidservants who take care of the clothing and food should be personally looked over by Princess." While she was speaking, several maidservants dressed as maidservants walked in and respectfully saluted Yili, "Greetings to Princess." Yili lowered her head to look at the guts that Nanny Sun had sent over. Not only did the names and ages of these maidservants were written clearly on it, there was also their family background and who was in their family. And they were all children of the Ding Wang Fu servants. Yili nodded and handed one of the guts to Lin Nanny and Wei Nanny to let them take care of the second and third-ranked maidservants. She turned back and smiled at Nanny Sun, "I naturally have confidence in the people that Nanny Sun has chosen." She casually picked out a few people from the list. The maidservants who had been picked quickly came out to give their thanks. Yili ordered Qing Shuang to take out a number of pouches filled with silver coins and rewarded each of them with 1. After taking care of the maidservants, Yili invited Nanny Sun to sit down and talk. As expected, she did as Mo Xiaoyao had said, she spoke without hiding anything. Yili hesitated for a while before asking, "Nanny Sun, the Wang Fu, other than De Sa, are there any other womenfolk?" Sun Mama was startled for a moment, but she quickly understood what Yili meant. Smiling, she said, replying to the princess, "Other than the eldest madam and the 2 concubines serving her, there are no other women in the house." Yili looked gloomily at Nanny Sun who was smiling strangely. She nodded to show that she understood. Mo Xiaoyao didn't have any other concubines. This was very good. At least it meant that there was less trouble for her to deal with. Not thinking about the troubles that she could encounter in the future, Yili found that the days in the Ding Wang Fu were as perfect as she had imagined in the beginning. Husband and wife lived in harmony and didn't interfere with each other's private matters. There were no elders to worry about in the morning and at night, no sisters-in-law to chat with, there wasn't even a jealous concubine. If this kind of life continued to be peaceful like this, she would be grateful to Mo Jingli for breaking off the engagement and the meddlesome emperor for granting the marriage. Chapter 86. Prince. Ajin looked strangely at Mo Xiaoyao who was staring at the book. Ajin had followed the prince since childhood. Even though he was slow, he could tell when the prince was thinking and when he was lost in thought. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes flashed and he raised his head to look at him. "Is something the matter?" Ajin rubbed the back of his head with some annoyance and said, "Prince, do you want to go see Wang Fei?" Mo Xiaoyao casually put the book back on the table. Looking at Ajin's uneasy state, he smiled faintly and said, "Did Chief Steward Mo tell you to ask, or did you ask Nurse Sun?" Ajin's eyes widened. Uncle and Nurse Sun had both mentioned that he should mention Wang Fei in front of the prince and find a chance for the prince and Wang Fei to spend more time together. But he didn't know how to find a chance. So when he saw the prince in a daze, which was rare, he thought that since he had nothing to do, he could ask the prince if he wanted to go see Wang Fei, right? Looking at Ajin's puzzled state, Mo Xiuyao shook his head and said with a smile, "All right, don't think about it. What is Li doing right now?" "She seems to be organizing the things she brought from the Yi family." "Then don't go now. Let's wait until she forgets." "Where are the guests from last night?" A hint of annoyance flashed through Jin's eyes. He said, "They're still in the dungeon." "Let's go see." In the dark dungeon, the flickering light of the fire projected the shadows of the people in the room onto the walls, swaying slightly with the light. It made the already gloomy dungeon even more mysterious. Feng Zhiyao was still dressed in his arrogant and grand red brocade robe. He lazily lay on the only chair in the dungeon and listened with satisfaction to the endless wails. Compared to the boredom of the past few years, he was very satisfied with the busy days of the past few days. "Speak, why did you break into the Prince Ding mansion at night?" In the center of the room, a black-clothed man was chained to a rack. His body was already riddled with scars, and he was glaring fiercely at him. "Feng Zhiyao, you're Prince Ding's man." "Oh. You know me. Looks like you're from the Chu state." Feng Zhiyao blinked his almond-shaped eyes. His interest was piqued. He sat up straight and looked at the person in front of him. "Where did you come from?" "In the palace. Is our emperor still the one from Zhangde Palace? Or which mansion did you come from?" "Humph." Half of the men of sacrifice were unyielding. Torture had not been able to make him confess. Naturally, Feng Zhiyao would not be able to make him talk with just a few words. Feng Zhiyao narrowed his eyes in displeasure. "This young master wants to see if your bones are harder than this young master's torture tool." "Continue." Swish. The ferocious barbed whip continued to create more scars on the man's body. Feng Zhiyao stared gloomily at the scene in front of him. The sound of the wheelchair turning came from afar. Feng Zhiyao turned around and saw Mo Xiuyao walking towards him. He stood up and smiled. "Why are you here at this time instead of accompanying the bride?" Mo Xiuyao did not answer. He raised his eyebrows and looked at him. "Confessed?" Feng Zhiyao helplessly pulled over the file that was placed at the side. "Last night, we caught 4 groups of 7 people. One of them was from the northern tribes, one from the southern Zhao. 2 of them wanted to take advantage of the situation and 3 of them refused to confess. The one from the northern tribes wanted to snatch the bride and make the Ding mansion look bad. The one from the southern Zhao only wanted to scout the terrain to see if there was a chance to get the cloud-embracing sword. The other 2 wanted to take the opportunity to steal something. As for this one, he was the first to be caught and also the one with the best martial arts. I suspect that he's here to assassinate, but the target of the assassination is unknown. He shouldn't be here to assassinate you." When Mo Xiuyao accompanied the bride back to the bridal chamber, this fellow was ambushed at the banquet area and was caught by the secret guards. So the target of the assassination should definitely be one of the guests present. "Someone from the Dechu state?" Mo Xiuyao turned to the hanging man in black and asked. Feng Zhiyao rubbed his chin. "He knows me. He must be someone from the Dechu state." Young Master Feng San was very famous, but it was only limited to the Dechu state and it was only limited to the capital. After all, a dandy young master who was expelled from the Feng family and did not have the right to inherit would not attract the interest of outsiders. "Continue. If you can't get anything out of him, just kill him." Mo Xiuyao said lightly. "Where is Yeluping?" Feng Zhiyao gestured towards the room beside him and ignored Mo Xiuyao. Instead, he stared at the black-clothed man in front of him with interest and laughed. The black-clothed man instinctively felt cold. He obviously knew that if he was caught, there was no way out. However, when he heard Prince Ding casually say to kill him if he couldn't get anything out of him, as if he was saying that the weather was good today, his heart couldn't help but tremble. Prince Ding was definitely not a crippled and useless piece of trash like what outsiders thought. Feng Zhiyao looked at him with a smile. "Actually, to this young master, it doesn't matter if you talk or not. You're going to die anyway, right? If you talk, this young master will give you a quick death. It's fine if you don't talk. You can try out this young master's new toy. These 2 years have been boring to death. A trace of fear flashed through the man's eyes, but he still refused to talk. Feng Zhiyao didn't mind. He waved his hand and signaled for the people beside him to do it. Then, he swaggered towards Mo Xiuyao's room. The other room was obviously much more comfortable than the previous one. At least, the entire room was dry and quiet. There wasn't any smell or blood. There was only a metal fence that divided the entire room into 2 halves. The prince of the northern tribes, who was still spouting nonsense last night, was now on the other side of the fence. He grabbed onto the fence and glared at Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao, you cripple. How dare you send people to capture I? Oh. I thought that the prince of the northern tribes had entered a place that he shouldn't have and was captured by I. Mo Xiuyao looked at him with a warm and cold smile. However, the prince of the northern tribes can rest assured. Even if it's because of the diplomatic relations between our 2 countries, I will definitely not harm the prince. Meeting his cold gaze, Yellow Ping couldn't help but tremble. He grabbed onto the fence and shook it even more angrily. Won't harm I? Then why did you lock I up here? I will definitely report this to your emperor. I'll chop off your head. Mo Xiuyao's lips curled. There are some urgent matters in the northern tribes. In fact, the northern tribes' envoy had already sent a letter to His Majesty to bid farewell. He left the capital in the morning. Yellow Ping was stunned. How is that possible? I's still here, who dares to leave? The prince of the northern tribes need not worry about not being able to return to your country. Later, I will personally send someone to send you back to the northern tribes. Hand it over to the crown prince. Hearing this, Yellow Ping's expression turned ugly. He was a bit of a hooligan, but he wasn't a fool. The crown prince didn't get along with his brother Yellow Yi. The 2 of them had been fighting for many years. If he landed in the crown prince's hands, then, 7th brother would definitely kill him. Mo Xiuyao, you despicable person. My 7th brother won't let you off. Mo Xiuyao laughed coldly. He raised his head and stared at him. Yellow Yi dared to send you to provoke I, so he should be mentally prepared to make sure that you won't be able to return. Or, what happened yesterday was the king of the northern tribe's idea. Then it seems like he doesn't really want you as his son. Yellow Ping seemed to have thought of something and his face turned pale. He glared fiercely at Mo Xiuyao. You're talking nonsense. 7th brother would never do that. His tone was obviously lacking in confidence. He was stupid, but he wasn't stupid. He had been mocked since he was young. Even his 7th brother often scolded him for being stupid. Even his father didn't like him. Could it be that? Chapter 87. Mo Xiuyao's eyes flashed darkly as he looked at the person in front of him. He no longer looked as smug as he did yesterday. If he could, he would definitely make this prince of the northern tribes die without a complete corpse. Even his bones and ashes would not be enough to quench the hatred in his heart. Unfortunately, this idiot was the prince of the northern tribes and could not die just yet. Just like those people outside, no matter how much he disliked them, no matter how much he hated them, he had to temporarily let them live. Too lazy to look at the person in front of him, Mo Xiuyao turned and walked out of the prison. Feng Zhiyao was leaning against the wall and looking at him with a grin. You really intend to hand this idiot over to the prince of the northern tribes? Mo Xiuyao raised an eyebrow and said, just this idiot is not enough. I don't care what method you use to make him spit out everything he knows in 10 days. See if there is anything useful to hand over to Yelu Hong. No matter what method. That's right, no matter what method. I just want an answer. No matter how stupid he is still Yelu Ye's younger brother. I don't believe that he doesn't know anything. Mo Xiaoyao said in a low voice, you know what to do after this. Feng Zhiyao nodded, the smile on his face widening. I understand. He is already pretty stupid. It wouldn't be a surprise if he became even more stupid. Isn't that right? Let Yelu Ping and Yelu Yi fight each other like dogs. I like this idea. Mo Xiaoyao nodded in satisfaction. I'll leave it to you. Take care, Your Highness. Enjoy your new marriage. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao and Jing's figures disappear through the prison door, Feng Zhiyao narrowed his eyes in satisfaction as he looked at the eerie prison in front of him. He could also hear faint pleas for mercy. The smile on his face became even more radiant. What a bunch of idiots. Of all people to provoke, they had to provoke Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao had never been kind since he was 3 years old. Ever since that incident, even his heart had turned black. Reporting to Wang Fei, concubine dowager is here. In the study, Yi Li was sorting out the account books she had brought from the Yi residence when a servant girl came in to report. Yi Li raised her head and was stunned to see the servant girl standing at the door. Qing Shuang had already opened her mouth and said, Jingguan, why are you here? This servant girl was the one who was sent to the sewing room by Yi Li when she was in the Yi residence. Her original name was Han Qing, Jingguan. The maids in King Ding's residence were all dressed in a moon-white robe with a plain-colored belt. This kind of simple yet elegant robe made her look a little flirtatious. Jingguan looked with alarm at Yi Li and said in a low voice, the mama in charge said that the clothes made by Jingguan's embroidery skills are not suitable for Wang Fei to wear. There are 4 first-rate embroiderers in the sewing room, so Jingguan was sent outside to serve. Although she was very happy to be able to leave the sewing room, a trace of shame flashed across Jingguan's face when her embroidery skills were found to be worthless. Yi Li faintly scolded this girl in her heart. This girl had stayed in the sewing room for a month or 2 and still didn't learn to be smarter. Did she think that she didn't have to worry about anything just because she had a good appearance? All right, you can leave first. Ask concubine dowager to come in. Yi Li waved her hand. Yes, princess consort. Jingguan bowed and respectfully retreated. Qing Shuang complained in dissatisfaction, why did Lin Mama and Wei Mama bring her to young miss? She doesn't look like someone who knows her place. Qing Wan and Qing Yu came later and weren't familiar with Jingguan who had stayed in the sewing room. They only felt that she was too enchanting. Hearing Qing Shuang's words, they immediately looked over. Qing Shuang stomped her feet in annoyance, it's all my fault. I actually forgot to tell Lin Mama. Qing Xia smiled faintly, all right, Qing Shuang, Lin Mama is an old mama who followed Furen. Do you think she can't see what kind of person Jingguan is? What's more, she's just a second-class girl who serves outside. Yun, and Chui, can't be compared to her. Ding Wang Fu is unfamiliar with the people and the place, so she can't do anything. Yi Li put down the book and smiled, Qing Shuang, you still have to learn more from Qing Xia. Don't be rash about everything. Qing Shuang stuck out her tongue, yes, I will follow Wang Fei's order. As soon as she stepped into the reception hall, Yi Li was stunned. A middle-aged woman in her 50s was sitting on the main seat. She was wearing a gorgeous brocade robe and a head ornament with gold and jade inlaid with gems. She looked very noble. If she didn't know her identity beforehand, Yi Li would have thought that she wasn't the old Prince Ding Sifei, but the Di Fei. At this time, side grand concubine was leaning against the chair and resting with her eyes closed. There were 2 maidservants standing behind her. One had her shoulders lowered and the other was gently fanning herself with a palace fan. Yi Li couldn't help but want to laugh. It wasn't even June yet. The weather in the Chu capital wasn't hot. Wasn't she afraid of catching a cold from the fan? Wang Fei. When everyone saw Yi Li come in, they quickly stood up and bowed. You can leave. I've made side grand concubine wait for a long time. Yi Li waved her hand to let them leave. She frowned and walked to the other side to sit down. Yang side grand concubine slowly opened her eyes and looked at Yili with a picky face. Yili had a smile on her lips and allowed her to size her up. She turned her gaze to a white-clothed young girl sitting below. That young girl seemed to be very timid. When she met Yili's gaze, she immediately shrank back and avoided her in a panic. Side grand concubine has come. Is there a matter? Yili looked away and turned to side grand concubine. Yang side grand concubine narrowed her eyes in displeasure. It was clear that she was no longer in her prime and her face darkened. She gave a light snort and said, Wang Fei is too arrogant. You don't know how to greet your elders after passing through the door. This dowager could only come and greet Wang Fei. Yili understood. So she had come to find trouble. She frowned with some trouble and looked at side grand concubine with a faint smile. Then this Fei has been rude. But this Fei asked Prince yesterday. The prince only said that he needed to go and greet De Sa after returning home. He didn't mention that there was anyone else in the Wang Fu that this Fei needs to personally greet. Yang side grand concubine's expression froze. It took a while before she recovered. She looked at Yili and said, Prince hasn't been in a good mood these years. It's hard to avoid oversights. It's fine if you don't remind him as a Wang Fei, but you dare to be so rude. Remind? Mo Xiuyao didn't even mention you. It's obvious that he doesn't want to see you. I only reminded him because I ate too much. Long before she got married, Yili had already memorized the identities of the members of the Ding King's Fu. For example, the Yang side concubine in front of her. Her identity was really special. Not only was she the only side concubine of the old Prince Ding Mo Lufang, she was also the aunt of Mo Xiuyao and Mo Xiuwen. She was also the sister of the former Princess Ding. But this identity didn't make her more respected in the Ding King's Fu. In fact, no matter if it was when Mo Lufang was alive or Mo Xiuwen, or now Mo Xiuyao, they all treated her as heir and ignored her. Yang side grand concubine wasn't even 50 years old this year. She was about the same age as Xiao Yang, eldest princess. But for two women who were widowed at the same time, one would think that they were at least 10 years apart just by looking at their appearance. But Yili wouldn't sympathize with her because of this. She could only say that she asked for it. Yang side grand concubine married into the Ding King's Fu when the former Princess Ding gave birth to Mo Xiuwen. After giving birth to Mo Xiuwen, Princess Ding's health became very poor. Her originally loving relationship with Prince Ding also became somewhat cold. Then, 7 years later, she passed away not long after giving birth to Mo Xiuyao. And compared to Mo Xiuyao's disregard for side grand concubine, the usually gentle and refined Mo Xiuwen's attitude towards her could be said to be one of disgust. Therefore, Yili had enough reason to think that side grand concubine used some unconventional method to marry into the Ding King's Fu and directly caused the relationship between Mo Lufang and Wang Fei to break. Even if she didn't talk about all of this, even if Mo Xiuyao would take in a concubine in the future, she would definitely not accept anyone from Yishan or Yilin. If it was said that she found it hard to accept sharing a husband with others, sharing a husband with her biological sister was simply challenging the limits of her tolerance. Chapter 88. I really don't know if there is a need for me to personally pay my respects to a secondary consort. Yili said faintly with her clear eyes half closed. You! How dare you! Secondary consort Yang was so angry that her face turned red and she pointed at Yili without saying a word. The identity of a secondary consort was the pain of her life. When she married into the prince's residence, she was already a secondary consort and she was not disappointed as she was born from a concubine. After her sister died, she thought that she had the chance to become the main consort because the prince only had her as his secondary consort. However, the prince did not even look at her until he died. Ever since Mo Lufang passed away, she knew that she would never have the chance. Until she died, she could only be a secondary consort and she could not even be buried with Mo Lufang. The prince's residence's consort Yang should know who is the one who is being impudent. Yili raised her head and stared at her faintly. The Ding King's residence respected the prince on the outside and the princess consort on the inside. Not to mention a mere secondary consort, even the proper consort Yang could not embarrass the princess consort. So after Mo Xiuwen passed away, the servants no longer addressed Princess Consort Wen as Princess Consort but as Eldest Madam. This indicated that her identity was the eldest sister-in-law of the prince's princess consort and not the princess consort of the Ding King's residence. After suppressing secondary consort Yang's arrogance, Yili's expression eased and she smiled faintly. Secondary consort Yang, do you have something to say for coming over so early? Secondary consort Yang, who was stunned by her sudden change in expression, regained her senses and her expression changed. She wanted to fly into a rage but the girl in white sitting by the side said uneasily, "Aunt." Secondary consort Yang looked at the girl in white and actually suppressed the anger in her heart. She turned to Yili and said, "This is my maternal family's niece, Qianru." The girl in white stood up and bowed towards Yili and said gently, "Qianru greets cousin-in-law." Greets cousin-in-law. Yili frowned. The daughter of the Yang family was the niece of the senior concubine, which meant that she was Mo Xiuyao's cousin. Yili was very unfamiliar with this cousin of hers. The main reason was that the Yang family was not a prestigious family. In fact, other than the first-generation Prince Ding, Mo Lanyun, who married a princess of the previous dynasty, the Mo family's several generations of princesses did not have prominent family backgrounds. Of course, this was because the men of the Mo family did not need nepotism. On the other hand, it was probably to avoid being feared by the royal family. As far as she knew, Princess Yang didn't have a legitimate brother in her mother's family, and the only concubine-born brother died a few years ago. Then Yang Qianru was the orphan of the concubine-born son of the Yang family. "Cousin, you don't have to be so courteous. Sit down." Prince must have forgotten that he hadn't heard him mention his cousin before, so he didn't have time to prepare a greeting gift. "Please don't blame me." While speaking, Yili took off the ice-type jade bracelet on her wrist and put it in Yang Qianru's hand. She smiled and asked senior concubine sitting on the side, "Cousin, do you live with senior concubine?" Senior concubine glanced at Yili and nodded. "Qianru is still young and has no other relatives. So I brought her here and can take care of her. After all, she is not a girl of the prince's mansion. It's okay to live with me." Yili didn't intend to arrange another courtyard. She nodded and smiled. "It's okay as long as cousin and senior concubine don't feel wronged. If you lack anything, just send someone to tell me. Don't be embarrassed." Senior concubine's eyes moved and said, "That's why I brought her to see you. Qianru is almost 17 years old this year. She should have considered marriage long ago. However, Prince usually doesn't see her, and I don't know much about it. Since you are Qianru's representative, then look carefully for her. Also, it's not proper for a girl to be so plain all day. She needs to wear more clothes." Senior concubine said to herself. Yang Qianru, who was sitting at the side, blushed. She lowered her head and refused to look at others. Yili leaned comfortably in the chair and listened to senior concubine speak of her demands. If there was a hint of discussion at the beginning, then it was a commanding tone towards the end. Yili looked at Yang Qianru's snow-white robes and couldn't help but frown. The Fu usually deducts cousin's expenses. Even if Mo Xiuyao didn't like senior concubine, he wouldn't go so far as to deduct a girl's expenses, right? Looking at Yang Qianru's plain white robes, even her hair was decorated with white ribbons. People who didn't know would think that she was mourning for someone. The Yahuan who had some status in the Fu dressed more appropriately than her. Yang Qianru suddenly raised her head, her eyes filled with tears and panic. She hurriedly said, "No, the Wang Fu didn't mistreat Qianru. Cousin-in-law, please don't misunderstand cousin Ji. It's Qianru's fault." Yili couldn't help rubbing her forehead. What was this? She rubbed her brow and said to Qing Wan, "Go see if Sun Mama is free. Ask her to come over." Sun Mama came quickly. Qing Wan had clearly told her about the matter, so she brought a steward who was in charge of the Fu's accounts and the expenses. "Greetings to Wang Fei. Greetings to senior concubine." The three bowed in unison. Yili nodded and said, "Sun Mama, you don't have to be so courteous." Sun Mama stood up and said, "Many thanks, Wang Fei. I heard that Wang Fei summoned this old servant for the matter of the side dowager's courtyard's expenses. This old servant acted on my own initiative and called Steward Wang from the accounting room and Zhang Mama who is in charge of expenses. Wang Fei, please forgive me." Yili smiled and said, "Sun Mama, you don't have to be like this. I just arrived and Wang Fei is not familiar with these things. Senior concubine mentioned the expenses of Miss Gu, so I asked you to come over and ask. In that case, Sun Mama Zhang, what about Miss Gu's expenses? If Miss Gu suffers any grievances and outsiders know about it, it will be our Wang Fu's fault." Sun Mama Zhang hurriedly stepped forward and said with a bad expression, reporting to Wang Fei, "Miss Gu's expenses have always been according to the expenses of the young miss of the Wang Fu. Although there hasn't been a young miss in our Fu for several generations, the previous rules have always been kept. This old servant doesn't dare to deduct Miss Gu's expenses. Then, what is Miss Gu's monthly expenses? If the previous rules are not enough, it doesn't matter if it is adjusted appropriately. Or it can be directly allocated from my and Prince's share." Yili said. Sun Mama Zhang glanced at Yang Qianru sitting on the side and said, "Miss Gu has 30 taels of silver to spend every month. The cosmetics she uses are all bought by the Fu. She has 4 sets of clothes for each of the spring, summer, autumn, and winter seasons. She also has 2 sets of head ornaments for the beginning of winter and the beginning of summer. She also doesn't dare to reduce her expenses during the holidays. This old servant has served in the Wang Fu for generations and doesn't dare to mistreat Miss Gu." The bookkeeper standing on the side also said, "Wang Fei is wise. Prince and Wang Fei are getting married, and everyone in the Fu has rewarded them. The eldest madam received 500 taels, senior concubine received 200 taels, and Miss Gu received 100 taels. The servants in the Fu have also received their rewards. This subordinate doesn't dare to delay and can send the account books as proof." When these words were said, everyone's eyes fell on Yang Qianru. Looking at her white robes and her weak appearance, it was as if she would be blown away by the wind. It really didn't look like she had been mistreated. Sun Mama's upright and serious face flashed with displeasure. "Don't say that the Wang Fu didn't mistreat her. Even if you have mistreated her for so many years, isn't it still the Wang Fu that raised you? The prince and princess just got married, what do you mean by wearing white?" Chapter 89. The maidservants who followed Yili from the Yi family also had opinions about this delicate cousin. Fourth Miss was already delicate and moving, but this one was even more fragile than her. Furthermore, the treatment of this cousin was not much different from the treatment of the Yi family's D-Miss. When their young miss was in the Yi family, she only received 30 taels of silver a month. Furthermore, this Miss Yang did not have any reputation in the capital. It could be seen that this person did not go out to socialize, so naturally, there was no need for her to spend. The young miss had just gotten married, yet she came over to complain that she was poor. It was too much. Yili frowned as she looked at the side grand concubine. It wasn't that she was stingy. She had just arrived at the Wang Fu and could not go against the rules set by the predecessors to increase Yang Qianru's treatment. Even if the Ding Wang Fu was large, it was impossible for them to casually withdraw money without any scruples. Without rules, nothing could be accomplished. Furthermore, the Wang Fu had treated Yang Qianru quite well. Unfortunately, the side grand concubine obviously did not think so. Seeing Yi Li's difficult expression, she couldn't help but angrily say, "What does princess mean? Qianru is still the prince's cousin. Can't it be that a few taels of silver can't be spent? If outsiders know that our Ding Wangfu mistreats an orphan girl whose parents are dead, the prince's face will not look good." In short, the side grand concubine wanted to put the reputation of mistreatment on Mo Xiuyao's head. Then, how much does side grand concubine think is reasonable? The side grand concubine frowned and said with an unwilling expression, "It should be 80 taels of silver a month. There are also head ornaments and accessories. How can 2 sets be enough? Qianru can't go out to meet people these few years and even her marriage has been delayed. In the future, there will be many times when she goes out with you. Let Fenghua Building send over 4 sets." Seeing the side grand concubine's matter-of-fact expression, Yi Li couldn't help but roll her eyes in her heart. When did she agree for young Qianru to follow her? Even if she did not go out these few years, she could still link it to the Wangfu. If it wasn't for the Prince Ding mansion, with the Yang family's background, they might not even remember the concubine daughter of the Prince Ding mansion. Side imperial concubine, please be careful with your words. Wang Fei is the mistress of the Ding Palace. It was impossible for him to bring an unmarried girl with him when he was walking around outside. Even if there is, it should be a girl from the prince's mansion or a D-sister from the princess family. Sun Mama said with a serious face. Yi Li couldn't help but praise him in her heart. She didn't want to go on blind dates with a weak girl who would shed tears at the sight of flowers and rain. Hearing Granny Sun's words, young Qianru's face turned red. She let out a low cry and clutched her chest. Tears welled up in her eyes and were about to fall. Without waiting for side grand concubine to get angry, Yi Li frowned and said to the 3 people, "Since you've asked clearly, Steward Wang and Mammy Zhang should go back first. In addition, I will allocate 10 taels of silver from my monthly allowance to Miss Biao. Since she's a guest, we can't let Miss Biao suffer." "Yes, we will follow Princess's orders." Steward Wang and Mama Zhang responded and retreated. Yi Li continued, "Side grand concubine and Miss Biao should also go back first. As for Miss Biao's marriage, I will discuss it with the prince before giving a reply to side grand concubine." Side grand concubine was unwilling, but when she saw Yi Li's expression of wanting to see them off, she didn't dare to go against Yi Li's intentions. She could only angrily leave with the aggrieved young Qianru. After sending the 2 off, Yi Li looked at Sun Mama and said, "Sun Mama, Steward Wang and Mammy Zhang's salaries will be increased by 10 taels this month. Just take it from me." Sun Mama complied and looked at Yi Li, saying, "Actually, Princess doesn't need to pay attention to side grand concubine and Miss Biao. Our Wang Fu has never treated Miss Biao unfairly. We haven't touched a single cent of the inheritance that the Yang family left to Miss Biao." Yi Li helplessly said, "Look at what she's wearing today. What would others think if they saw her like this?" Sun Momo pursed her lips and said, "Princess consort, you may not know this, but this Miss Biao is very strange. It's said that she likes white very much. The clothes we sent for the 4 seasons were all colors that girls like, but Miss Biao said that they were tacky. She was only willing to wear white clothes. If the clothes we sent didn't have white, she would rather wear her old clothes. She ruined a lot of clothes for no reason." The steward of the Fu had no choice but to send white clothes. For the prince and princess's wedding, Mama Zhang had specially ordered people to make a set of peach red and a set of light purple. Who knows? Tacky? Not necessarily, right? Yi Li thought of another person who liked to wear plain clothes. In the future, there will be many guests in the Wang Fu. We can't let her come out to meet people like this. In the past, the Wang Fu basically didn't interact with outsiders. Now that Mo Xiuyao was married and had come out to meet people, it wouldn't do to close the doors and refuse guests. "I'll go back and ask Prince if he wants to change out of all the plain clothes." Thinking, Yi Li said with a slight smile. Sun Mama froze for a moment, then immediately reacted, What does princess mean? I didn't say anything. I just don't like white clothes. Yi Li said with a smile. Princess, Prince invites you. Mo Xiuyao didn't have any servant girls to serve him, so the one who came to deliver the message was one of Mo Xiuyao's personal guards. Yi Li nodded and stood to ask, where is the prince right now? The guard said, the prince is waiting for princess in the water pavilion. I know. You can go. The Ding Wang Fu could be said to be the largest fu in Jing City. Of course, this was related to the position of the Ding Wang Fu in the Dechu state. The Wang Fu had been remodeled by successive princes for over 100 years. Even though the area hadn't expanded, the scenery inside the Wang Fu could be called the best in Jing City. In the southwest corner of the Wang Fu, there was a natural lake that took up 1/6 of the entire Wang Fu. There was a wooden corridor built on the surface of the lake that led to a water pavilion with 3 rooms in the middle of the lake. The surface of the lake was covered in green lotus leaves, making the lake water ripple. Just walking in, one could feel a faint coolness. It must be a good place to relax in the summer. Waving her hand to stop the servant girls, Yi Li walked alone along the corridor on the surface of the lake towards the pavilion in the middle of the lake. As expected, she saw Mo Xiuyao sitting in front of the open window, lost in thought. Hearing her footsteps, Mo Xiuyao came back to his senses and said with a smile, Yi Li walked in, what are you thinking about? Mo Xiuyao shook his head and said with a smile, I've been busy with some trivial matters these past 2 days. I didn't have time to ask if you're used to it. Yi Li shrugged and found a place to sit across from him. She said with a smile, my ability to adapt has always been very good. The people in the Wang Fu are also very good. I'm very used to it. Seeing Mo Xiuyao looking at her with a strange expression, Yi Li blinked her eyes and said with a smile, it can't be that you're not used to it, right? She didn't expect Mo Xiuyao to actually nod his head and said with a smile in a low voice, I'm indeed not used to it. It seems, it's been many years since I was the only one in this Wang Fu. Do you need me to leave? Yi Li was a little apologetic. She didn't think that her existence would cause trouble for Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao laughed involuntarily and shook his head, how could that be? Li, I thought that we were husband and wife. So. I feel that we need to spend more time together, Mo Xiuyao said. Yi Li understood. Some people would habitually avoid things that they were not used to, but others would choose to face them head-on. Mo Xiuyao clearly belonged to the latter. For a couple like them who clearly had no feelings before marriage, they needed to cultivate feelings after marriage. Do you have any good suggestions? Mo Xiuyao said, if you have time, you can accompany me to talk or read a book. Or if you don't feel ashamed, I can accompany you for a walk. Chapter 90. Go out. Yi Li was a bit tempted. She seemed to have forgotten that there was another benefit after getting married. It was more convenient to go out than before. No problem. Yi Li nodded, agreeing with Mo Xiuyao's suggestion. Mo Xiuyao was startled when he saw that she didn't hesitate at all. A faint smile appeared on his lips. You said you wanted to draw a portrait for Ali yesterday. Ali, come over and take a look. What do you think of this? Yi Li walked over in surprise. You're done so quickly. There was an open painting on the table in front of Mo Xiuyao. In the painting, there was a woman dressed in red standing with a sword. Yi Li recognized at a glance that the dress and the accessories on her head were the ones she had worn on the day of her wedding. However, the red dress she was wearing was not the heavy and complicated wedding dress embroidered with a phoenix peony. Instead, it was a simple red dress with golden cloud embroidery. There was a golden belt around her waist. The peony between her eyebrows had been replaced by a bright red flame. The woman's hands were dancing. Her expression was bright and dignified, but there was also a trace of arrogance and sharpness. This is me. Yili looked at the woman in the painting in a daze and softly said. The woman in the painting had a familiar face, but it also seemed a bit unfamiliar. However, that unfamiliar feeling seemed to be the one she was truly familiar with. For some reason, Yili felt that the woman in the painting was very beautiful. She was 100 times more beautiful than her usual self in the mirror. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, the beauty dance of the past, one sword moves the 4 directions. Li has the style of Princess Qing Yun of the past. I haven't. Yili shook her head. She had never wielded a sword in front of anyone before. More accurately, she did not know how to wield a sword at all. Yili was lost in thought as she looked at the cloud-embracing sword in the hand of the woman in the painting. Mo Xiaoyao faintly smiled and said, I feel that this is the real Li. Yili was silent. However, her eyes could not move away from the woman in the painting. Indeed, she had seen such an expression on another familiar face before. He came and went freely in the rain of bullets, and killed enemies with his bare hands in the rain of blood. That was a completely different life from now. Ever since she accepted reality, she had been trying her best to conform to the standards of women in this era. She also thought that she had gradually forgotten the woman who laughed wantonly in the mud and sweat. But, if she had really forgotten about it, if she had really accepted it, how could she have hidden her skills like this? That day, when Li held the cloud-embracing sword, I felt that Li was more beautiful than I've ever seen her. Mo Xiaoyao seemed to sigh. The image of Yili unsheathing her cloud-embracing sword appeared in his mind. Although it was only for a short moment, it was completely different from any other woman's biting cold aura, and the free and unrestrained heroic spirit of brandishing her sword. In that instant, Mo Xiaoyao thought he was looking at a famous general who had dominated the battlefield. Can you give me this painting? Yili asked hesitantly. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, this was originally meant for you. Ever since the topic of painting had been brought up yesterday, Mo Xiaoyao knew that Li was just joking. But in his mind, from time to time, Yili's beautiful appearance on their wedding night, and the scene of her unsheathing her sword that day in the main hall of the Yi residence. So even though there were many things to do in the palace these past 2 days, he still worked through the night to finish this painting. But, you haven't written it yet? What does Li think is appropriate? Yili shook her head. She hesitated and said, no need. I don't need to take it out for others to admire. She really liked this painting. If she wrote it, what would she do if it was ruined? Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow and then nodded and said, all right, since you want to write it, you still need to sign it off. He picked up a brush from the brush holder on the table and ordered, help me grind the ink. Yili was also curious about Mo Xiaoyao's handwriting. Just from the painting, when Mo Xiaoyao said that his painting was not worse than Han Mingyue's, he was not boasting. But how was his handwriting? Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and smiled, Li's calligraphy is unique. I might have to disappoint you. Yili smiled as she watched him dip the brush in the ink and leave a line of words on the side of the painting. Prince Ding Xiaoyao presents his wife Li. Mo Xiaoyao's handwriting was tall and elegant. It looked imposing, but it did not make people feel that it was showing off. Yili was very satisfied. She carefully took the painting to the side to dry it and put it away. When she saw the words, presents his wife Li on the painting, she suddenly had a strange feeling. She looked up at Mo Xiaoyao and saw that he was looking at her. If she just looked away, wouldn't she seem guilty? Yili could only open her eyes wide and look back. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and was the first to look away. The strange atmosphere made Yili want to leave, but the painting on the table made her reluctant to leave. And if she left like this, wouldn't it mean that she admitted defeat? She had just promised to spend more time with him. Her mind quickly turned. Yili quickly changed the topic, right, I wanted to discuss something with you. Can you change out of all the white clothes? Seeing Mo Xiaoyao raise his eyebrows in confusion, Yili asked, or do you just happen to like white clothes? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head, I don't have a preference for colors. I'm just used to it. But, why did you think of this? Based on his understanding of Yi Li, she definitely wouldn't be interested in what color he wore. Yi Li smiled and told him what happened in the courtyard. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her speechlessly. So you think that because I wear white, she won't wear anything but white? Yi Li nodded. That's what I think. But I don't wear white clothes every day. Although his clothes were mostly plain, it didn't mean that he didn't have any other colors. But it's very obvious that every time you appear in front of her, you're probably coincidentally wearing white. Yi Li shrugged lazily. Ha! Li Li, are you jealous? Mo Xiaoyao stared at her for a long time and laughed softly. Jealous? Yi Li's face couldn't help but darken. She shot up and said woodenly, apologies, my fu lacks vinegar. Finishing, she didn't even look at the painting as she turned and walked out. Prince? A short while later, a Jing appeared at the door and looked at Mo Xiaoyao. Son, Mama was right. Prince didn't know how to interact with Wang Fei. Wang Fei was so angry that she ran away in a short while. Mo Xiaoyao gave a faint smile. Later, send this painting to Wang Fei. Qing Wan and the others followed behind Yi Li. Seeing their usually gentle young miss striding away with a black face, they couldn't help but look at each other. The pavilion in the center of the lake was too far from the shore. They couldn't hear what Prince and Wang Fei had said. Qing Xia asked uncertainly, did Prince bully Wang Fei? Qing Shuang's face instantly darkened. What? Prince bullied Miss? Qing Wan and Qing Yu helplessly pulled back Qing Shuang, who was about to explode. Qing Wan's mouth couldn't help but twitch. She had seen Wang Fei's skills with her own eyes. She could easily knock out a strong man without even panting. Just based on the fact that Prince was in a wheelchair, could he bully Wang Fei? Qing Yu thought for a moment and said, let's ask Jean later. He definitely knows. Qing Shuang twisted her mouth. He stayed by the shore like us, what could he know? Qing Xia agreed, he's been with Prince since he was a child. He definitely knows how Prince made Wang Fei angry. Let's go, Wang Fei has gone far. Chapter 91. Yi Li walked quickly towards her own yard as she cursed Mo Xiaoyao in her heart. She must have been blind to think that this guy was gentle. She had even thought that he was pure. That bastard had teased her. Jealous. Jealous, idiot, how could she be jealous over a man she had just met? At most, she liked him because he coveted her things. What's wrong, Wang Fei? Returning to the yard, Wei Mama came out to greet her. Seeing Yi Li's dark expression, she quickly asked. After leaving the young miss she had raised for so many years, Wei Mama had given Yi Li all the care she had missed in the past few years. She was more concerned about her health than anyone else. Being asked this by the mama, Yi Li felt a bit embarrassed. She knew that she had overreacted. She didn't have the face to say that she had left in a fit of pique after being teased by Mo Xiaoyao. She quickly pulled Wei Mama and said, Nanny, didn't I tell you to rest? Be careful that your little grandson won't recognize you if you keep circling around me like this. Lin Mama and Wei Mama's entire family had followed Yi Li to the Wang Fu. Yi Li had placed the capable men of their family in the shops or farmsteads outside to be stewards. The womenfolk were left in her own yard. She did her best to have them serve her as little as possible. Especially since Lin Mama wasn't young anymore. It wouldn't be easy for her to run around with a young person like her. Wei Mama looked at her and said with a bit of sadness, young miss has grown up and doesn't like Nanny, right? Nanny. Yi Li's head hurt. It was this again. But at least she had moved on from the previous matter. Pulling Wei Mama into the room, Yi Li comforted her with gentle words, causing Wei Mama to smile. Wang Fei, Jean is here. Qing Shuang came in and said. Her delicate face was still puffed up with anger. It was clear that she was angry with Jin outside. Let him come in. Yili teased with a smile, who provoked our Shuang her. Qing Shuang's little face blushed, and she stomped her foot and said, young miss. It's all because of that damned Jin. Just because he's one of Prince's people, he's always putting on a poker face, as if someone owes him 500 taels of silver. Yili sighed helplessly. Qing Shuang, you're the one who's being unreasonable. Jin just doesn't like to talk. He's far from a dead face. Mo Jingli was the one with the deadpan face. Jin was at most a man of few words. Even her second brother could not compare to that cold face of hers. Jin came in with the box and looked at Qing expressionlessly. Qing Shuang also knew that the person in question had heard her bad-mouthing someone behind their back. She turned her face away guiltily. Yili laughed in her heart, but on the surface, she looked at Jin with a serious face. Jin, what's the matter? Jin put the box on the table and took 2 steps back before saying, Jin was ordered by His Highness to deliver this. Prince said that he did not purposely make Wang Fei angry. Wang Fei Darren, please be magnanimous and do not take offense. He stuttered as he spoke. Yili knew what was going on. She looked at Jin with a smile and said, Jin, who taught you that last sentence? Jin's face turned red. He looked dazedly at Yili and didn't know what to do. Wang Fei and Prince were both smart people. Lying in front of them would always be seen through. Jin silently remembered this fact. Yili smiled and added, your prince definitely wouldn't say something like that. Also, I'm not angry. I'll take the item. You can go back. Jin silently left. Yili opened the box in a good mood. As expected, there was the portrait she had been thinking about. She had just been thinking about what excuse to use to get the portrait back. She hadn't thought that Mo Xiaoyao would be so considerate and immediately send Jin to deliver it. Unfolding the portrait on the table, Yili stared at the woman in the portrait and sighed softly. Mo Xiaoyao's voice couldn't help but ring in her mind, I feel that this is the real Li, so beautiful. Qing Shuang, who was standing at the side, exclaimed excitedly, Miss, was this painted by Prince? It's so beautiful. Wei Momo also nodded with satisfaction and smiled, Prince is really considerate towards Mississippi. It seems that eldest master and eldest young master didn't misjudge him. He. Yili was speechless. Was there a need for a portrait? In the blink of an eye, it was time to return home. These 3 days, Yili could be said to have adapted well in the Ding King's Fu. Even Lin Momo and Wei Momo, who had been worried, relaxed. Only the prince and the princess consort hadn't consummated yet. This made the 2 nannies very dissatisfied. However, they weren't the only ones who were worried and dissatisfied. There was also Sun Momo from the Ding King's Fu. Sun Momo had watched Mo Xiaoyao grow up and knew her master's temper well. She wasn't dissatisfied with the new princess consort. She even hinted that Lin Momo and Wei Momo would think of a way. The Ding King's Fu was harmonious and respected their miss very much. When they returned home, Miss would officially take charge of the Ding King's Fu. How could the 2 nannies be dissatisfied? Therefore, when they returned home, the smile on their faces was like a blooming flower. The Yi family's welcome was exceptionally grand. Not only did Minister Yi and Wangshe bring Yi Shan, Yi Lin, and Yi Rong, even the married Yi Zhen and Yi Ying brought their respective husbands back. Yili wasn't curious that Yi Ying would come back to join in the fun. However, Yi Zhen, as the concubine of the Southern Marquis heir, was able to let the Southern Marquis heir accompany her back. Once they entered the door and met old Madame Yi, Yili was pulled away by her sisters to have a private chat. Mo Xiaoyao stayed in the main hall to talk with Minister Yi and Mo Jingli. Qing Yi Xian, where Yili used to live, was still there. The sisters sat at the stone table in Qing Yi Xian's courtyard to talk. Yizhen looked at the maidservant standing not far away and then looked at Yili, who was wearing a light purple robe. She wore a pearl tassel hairpin, pearl earrings, and a lotus-patterned warm jade bracelet on her wrist. Her expression was indifferent and there was a smile on her lips. It seemed that she had an additional noble aura compared to when she was at home. She couldn't help but sigh enviously. It seems that third sister is having a good time in the Ding King's residence. Yili smiled, thank you for your concern. Everything is fine. Yishan pulled Yili and asked non-stop, such as whether the Ding King's residence was big or not, whether it was beautiful, who were the people in the residence, whether they were easy to get along with and so on. Yili wasn't in a hurry. She waited for her to ask enough before she answered some of the questions. Yishan didn't get an answer and wanted to ask again. However, she was pulled away by Yilin, who was sitting beside her. She could only shut her mouth in disappointment. I heard that the Ding King's residence has a former princess and concubine. Has third sister seen them? Yishan kept asking non-stop and Ying couldn't get a word in edgewise. She could only sit by the side with an indifferent face. At this time, she stared at Yili and asked. Yili looked at Ying in surprise and frowned, fourth sister, are you not feeling well recently? It hadn't been long since they last met and Yi Ying's appearance had changed a lot. She felt that she had become thinner and frilier. In the past when she was in the Yi family, although Yi Ying was weak, Wang Shi had taken good care of her. Her face always had an alluring blush. But now, without that blush, her entire person suddenly became darker. Although she had put on some rouge on her face, it wasn't as beautiful and natural as before. Yi Ying's gaze changed slightly and she faintly lowered her eyes. Thank you for your concern, third sister. I am just a little tired. Chapter 92. Yili sighed in her heart. Yi Ying had really changed a lot. It seemed that the ability of virtuous concubine Zhao old concubine to teach people was beyond Ye old madam's reach. If you are tired, rest more. No matter what, your body is the most important. Without a good body, there is nothing. Yili advised a few words before answering Yi Ying's question. Sister-in-law has been practicing Buddhism all year round. She only pays her respects when she returns. As for Su old concubine. Thinking of the eccentric Su old concubine in the Fu, Yili couldn't help but frown and said lightly, Father Su Fei does not need to meet often. Yishan exclaimed, then isn't there only third sister and Prince Ding in the Ding King Fu? When these words came out, not only Yishan, Yizhen and Yilin, but even Ying couldn't help but reveal a trace of envy. In the Fu, there were no elders above, no sister-in-law or sister-in-law, and even no sister-in-law to deal with. It was simply every newly married woman's dream. But when she thought of Mo Xiuyao's situation, Yi Ying faintly felt that she was balanced. Compared to being ridiculed and sympathized with outside, being wronged at home was still bearable, right? It seems that third sister and prince's relationship is also very good. Third sister is really lucky. Yizhen sighed and said faintly. Yi Ying didn't believe it and asked suspiciously, is Prince Ding's temper really that good? I heard others say that people with physical disabilities generally have weird tempers. Yili frowned and said, Prince is not difficult to get along with. She didn't know if Mo Xiuyao's temper was good, but at present, they were getting along very well. Yi Ying also knew that Yili was a little unhappy because of her words, but she was never used to lowering her head to Yili. For a moment, the atmosphere was a little stiff. Yizhen looked at the two and could only open her mouth to change the topic. In a few days, the palace will hold a banquet to send off the envoys from various countries. Have third sister and fourth sister received the invitation? Yili shook her head and said, no. Yilin smiled and said, the envoys from various countries are here to celebrate third sister and prince's wedding. Even if the others don't attend, the prince and third sister will definitely attend. But how did eldest sister find out faster than third sister and fourth sister? Yizhen smiled and said, this time, it was the emperor who gave our family's Shitsi the responsibility. Naturally, I know some things first. Yishan's eyes lit up and said, then, will eldest sister be going later? Yizhen nodded her head shyly and happily. The crown prince said that he would bring me to the palace this time. After saying this, she looked gratefully at Yi Li. Clearly, Marquis Nan Shitsi had decided to bring a side consort like her to the palace banquet because she had just become Princess Ding's younger sister. Although she was only a secondary consort, Yizhen now felt that she could stand firm in the Marquis Fu. After all, even the princess consort didn't have a younger sister who was a Jiaoyi and 2 younger sisters who were Wang Fei. Based on this point, if she could give birth to an heir, she would have a chance to compete with the princess consort in the future. Even if eldest sister can go, you definitely can't go. Ying glanced at Yishan and said coldly. Yishan immediately blushed and said embarrassedly, fourth sister, I don't think so. Ying didn't even look at her and said, who has the time to care about what you think? It's just that some people can't see their own status clearly. You. Yishan's eyes were red and tears welled up in her eyes. In the end, she could only get up and run out. Yi Ying's words were too harsh. Although they were directed at Yishan, Yi Lin still felt uncomfortable. Seeing Yishan run away, she also got up and chased after her. Even Yizhen's expression was not good. Yi Li looked strangely at Yi Ying and then at Yizhen. Yizhen sighed helplessly and said softly, fourth sister, even if you're in a bad mood, don't take it out on sixth sister. Yi Ying gripped the handkerchief in her hand and sneered, I'm in a bad mood? Eldest sister, ask third sister if she's in a good mood. Greetings to the 3 young ladies. Old Madam invites Princess Ding over for a chat. A maid from Rongla Hall came over to pass on the message. Yi Ying glanced at Yi Li and sneered, third sister, don't you want to know what happened to me? You'll know when you get there. Yi Li shook her head and got up to look at Yi Ying, fourth sister, your temper is fine at home. You're already married, but you're still like this. Do you think Madam can still protect you all the time? Yi Ying's expression darkened and she stubbornly turned her head away and didn't speak. Yi Li didn't force her. Although they were blood-related sisters, she didn't have the feelings for them as compared to her former cousins. She also didn't have the same feelings for her cousins in the Su family. If she could persuade them, she would. If they didn't listen, there was nothing she could do. When they arrived at Rongla Hall, old Madam Yi was sitting in the flower hall dressed in a festive manner. When she saw Yi Li coming in, she smiled like a flower. Li, come and let grandmother take a look. Yi Li walked over and sat beside old Madam Yi. Old Madam Yi sized up Yi Li and nodded her head in satisfaction. Are you used to living in the Ding Palace these few days? Are the servants in the palace easy to order around? Did anyone make things difficult for you? Yi Li smiled, I've made grandmother worry. Li, as well. The servants in the palace are also very respectful. Old Madam Yi nodded her head repeatedly, that's good, that's good. Then you and Prince. Yi Li said, Prince is also easy to get along with. Old Madam Yi was in a difficult position. She looked at Yi Li and said, grandmother is talking about you and Prince. You and Prince, when do you plan to have a child? Prince is not young anymore. Yi Li was slightly embarrassed. Old Madam Yi pondered for a long time and wanted to ask if they had consummated their marriage. Old Madam Yi stared at her and said, don't lie to grandmother. If grandmother can't tell, then she has lived for so many years in vain. You and Prince haven't consummated your marriage yet, right? Old Madam Yi obviously understood that this granddaughter was different from the others. She quickly gave up beating around the bush and asked directly. She could also tell. Yi Li thought for a while and said calmly, grandmother, you don't have to worry. Prince and I don't feel that we are familiar with each other. It's not too late to get along with each other for a while. Moreover, we are getting along very well now, so there's no hurry. Old Madame Yi looked at Yi Li's calm face and secretly shook her head in her heart. Then, who will take care of the affairs of the prince's mansion? The external affairs will naturally be taken care of by Prince. The affairs of the prince's mansion will be handed over to me after we return. Yi Li replied. Old Madame Ye's expression became slightly better. At least this granddaughter knew how to grasp the power of the prince's mansion. Old Madame Yi was really helpless towards Yi Li and Yi Ying, these two granddaughters. Yi Ying looked smart, but in fact, she was brainless. After marrying into the prince's mansion, she didn't know how to grasp the power of the prince's mansion. Every day, she was jealous of her concubines and made herself look like a resentful wife. In contrast, Yi Li, who didn't reveal her talents, was obviously much smarter. Just by looking at the attitude of the servants who followed Yi Li from the prince's mansion, one could tell that she had a good life in the Prince Ding mansion. But she didn't care about Prince Ding too much. Even as Princess Ding, if she wanted a lifetime of glory and wealth, she still had to rely on Prince Ding. Tell grandmother honestly. Is it because of Prince Ding's leg that you? Old Madame Yi waved away the servants in front of her and grabbed Yi Li to ask in a low voice. Chapter 93. Yi Li was speechless, but in old Madame Ye's eyes, her guess was confirmed. Old Madame Yi sighed, poor child, grandma knows you have a hard life. But things are already like this, and you have already married into the Prince Ding mansion, what else can you do? Even if you are Princess Ding, you still have to hold tightly onto the prince. The most important thing is to have children. As long as you have children, no one can touch your position. Do you understand? Does the prince have concubines? Yi Li shook her head. Old Madame Ye's smile became brighter. It seems that the prince still values you. It's better if you don't have concubines. As long as you have children with the prince first, in the future. Looking at old Madame Ye's speechless expression, Yi Li pondered for a long time and finally understood old Madame Ye's meaning. Old Madame Yi was telling her that even if she didn't like Mo Xiuyao's disabled legs, she must have children first. As long as she had children, if she really couldn't accept Mo Xiuyao, she could push him to other women. Anyway, she was the princess and had status, as long as she had children. A man's favor was mostly unreliable. Why didn't she doubt that Mo Xiuyao couldn't do it? Yi Li had some evil thoughts. Thank you for your advice, Grandma, Li knows. In order to prevent old Madame Yi from continuing to impart her experience to her, Yi Li quickly agreed. Old Madame Yi was very satisfied with her advice and nodded, good child, Grandma knows that you understand better than her. Originally, you shouldn't have said this today, but after you become the Princess Ding, you won't have time to come home. Grandma will say it to you now. After a few days, if you have nothing to do, you can pick up your fifth sister and sixth sister to accompany you in the mansion. Yi Li was startled and slightly frowned. Old Madame Yi said, Shan, and Lin, are good children. You sisters grew up together. If they can, it will be helpful for you and Grandmother's intention was for Lin, to be more mature. It would be best if she could follow to the Li Palace. Shan's temperament is lively, and your temperament can suppress her. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Yi Li couldn't help but want to go crazy. Isn't this old lady taking things for granted? Even the personnel had been allocated. It just so happened that the Li Prince Mansion and the Prince Ding Mansion had one each. No wonder Yi Ying's expression was so ugly just now. She was already sullen enough when she fought with Mo Jingli's concubine in the Li Palace. In the end, her maternal family even sent her own sisters to make things worse. Anyone would be depressed. Coughing lightly, Yi Li straightened her face and said with a smile, Grandmother, isn't it too early to talk about this? The prince and I haven't. If I rush to let my younger sister enter the residence, what will the prince think? Old Madame Yi smiled and said, grandmother didn't ask you to do it now. Anyway, Shan was still young. It wouldn't hurt to wait another 1 or 2 years. As long as you have a plan in your heart, it's fine. Yili pulled the corner of her mouth and asked, although 5th sister and 6th sister are born of concubines, the status of our minister's mansion is not low. Entering the prince's mansion as a concubine would be a grievance to them. Old Madam Yi waved her hand carelessly and said, marriage is decided by the parents. What grievance do they have? Isn't entering the prince's mansion as a concubine more honorable than marrying a minor official or a concubine's son as the legal wife? Li doesn't need to worry about the two of them. Shan and Lin have always been obedient. They won't have any objections. I have objections. Yili thought for a while and said, Li understands what grandmother and father mean. But our family's daughters, except for 2nd sister who entered the palace, have all joined the prince's mansion. This is not good for 2nd sister. This matter. Has grandmother discussed it with father? In fact, after thinking about it seriously, Yili understood why old Madam Yi was so worried. Wasn't it because of the unborn child in the palace who was still unknown whether it was a boy or a girl? Not to mention now that she had joined the Prince Ding mansion, even if she was still unmarried, Yili had never planned to cooperate with old Madam Ye's wild and imaginative plan. She really didn't understand why Minister Yi, who was considered an official for a long time, would agree with the plan of an old man who sat at home and didn't go out. Old Madam Yi was stunned. She squinted her old eyes and looked at Yili for a while before saying, what do you mean? Yili smiled and said, Li is also a daughter of the Yi family. If 2nd sister is good, then naturally Li is good. But grandmother can't only care about 2 princes' mansion. You have to know. Prince always doesn't care about the facts. And the support of the officials in the court is also very important. This. Yili smiled faintly and said, Li doesn't know about 4th sister. But if it's the Prince Ding mansion, grandmother should rest assured that Li doesn't need any help. Old Madam Yi was silent for a moment. She also knew that Yili's words made sense. Not to mention that Yili was confident that she could control the Prince Ding mansion. Then, she really didn't need the Yi family to compensate another daughter. But if Yili wasn't willing and they forced one to go over, it wouldn't look good if the sisters fought against each other. And from old Madam Ye's point of view, whether it was Yi Shan or Yi Lin, they obviously couldn't win against Yili. After thinking through this, old Madam Yi didn't insist anymore. She smiled and said, Li's words make sense. It's grandmother who didn't think it through. Just treat it as if grandmother didn't mention it. Although the Prince Ding mansion had a prominent reputation, but in the past generations, Prince Ding had never participated in the royal family's affairs. From this point of view, the Prince Ding mansion's role wasn't as big as the princely mansion. Yes, grandmother didn't say anything. Li also didn't hear anything. Yili softly replied. Of course, it would be best to dispel old Madam Ye's thoughts. In the future, the Prince Ding mansion would be her home. She didn't want to see any existence that would make her feel uncomfortable there. After chatting with old Madam Yi for a while, the servants came to invite them to eat. Because it was a family banquet, there weren't any outsiders present. Only old Madam Yi brought Minister Yi and Wang Shi, Mo Jingli, and Yi Ying, Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li, as well as Nan Ho's heir, Fu Zhao. At the dining table, Yili could clearly feel a cold gaze sweeping over her body from time to time. Without even looking up, Yili could guess who that person was. Yi Ying attentively served Mo Jingli dishes. Mo Jingli was still staring at Yili from time to time with an expression as if someone owed him a few thousand taels. Mo Xiuyao and Yili ate leisurely and calmly, occasionally serving each other's favorite dishes. Fu Zhao looked thoughtfully at this side and then at the other side, drinking and eating as if nothing had happened. On the other hand, Minister Ye's expression was slightly awkward and comical. It could be seen that he was trying to make the atmosphere at the banquet more harmonious and natural. But he couldn't afford to offend any of the three sons-in-law. Other than Nan Ho Shitsi, who gave him some face, Mo Xiaoyao wasn't hard to get along with. Mo Jingli's face clearly showed that he wasn't happy. Cough, speaking of Prince, we haven't seen each other in a few years. Let me give you a toast. In the end, it was Fu Zhao who broke the strange atmosphere. He stood and gave a toast to Mo Xiaoyao, also to Wang Fei. May Prince and Wang Fei have a long and happy life together. Mo Xiaoyao raised his wine cup and said with a warm smile, "Thank you for your auspicious words. I wasn't able to go and congratulate you on your wedding. Don't blame me." He raised his head and drank Fu Zhao's toast. The smile on Fu Zhao's face became more genuine. He said with a smile, "No matter. We've known each other since childhood. Now we are relatives. Before we came, my mother told me to invite Wang Fei to visit the Marquis Fu when she has the time." This Nan Ho Shitsi clearly knew how to conduct himself. Everyone in Jing knew that while Nan Ho Shitsi hadn't inherited the title, the Shitsi Fei was in charge of the Marquis Fu. At this time, he didn't mention the Shitsi Fei and only spoke of the Nan Ho Furen. Chapter 94. Yili raised her cup to return the toast and said with a smile, "Shitsi has written Nan Ho Furen for me." Yili raised her cup to return the toast and said with a smile, "Shitsi has written Nan Ho Furen for me." Mo Jingli looked at the people talking and laughing in front of him. He lightly snorted and stood, saying, "Since Fu Zhao has made a toast, then Mo Xiaoyao, I will also make a toast to you." Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow and smiled faintly, saying, "I also haven't drunk with Jingli in a long time. Will I also make a toast to you and Li Wang Fei?" Mo Jingli lightly snorted and waved away the servant girl who came forward to pour wine. He personally poured a cup for Mo Xiaoyao and himself. He raised his head and drank it all. Then he looked provocatively at the wine cup in front of Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and did not speak. He raised the cup and drank it all. Again. Mo Jingli raised the wine pot and filled it again. The two actually started to drink at the table. Yili frowned as she looked at the two men drinking without a word. Minister Ye's eyes were about to fly out but no one paid attention. Old Madame Yi tried to persuade him but was ignored by Mo Jingli. Mo Xiaoyao nodded at old Madame Yi with a smile but did not refuse Mo Jingli's urging to drink. Yili glanced at Jin who was standing not far away. Jin detected Yili's gaze and showed an anxious expression as she looked at Mo Xiaoyao who was silently drinking. Mo Jingli once again reached out to pour wine, a jade-like hand covering the wine cup. Mo Jingli's face darkened. He raised an eyebrow at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "Mo Xiaoyao, what is the meaning of this?" Yili's expression was indifferent. She placed the wine cup in front of her. "Is Li Wang drunk?" "The one who stopped the wine was me." "Why are you asking about my family's prince?" Mo Jingli sneered and said disdainfully, "What business does a woman have when a man drinks? I won't lower myself to a woman's level." Yili smiled coldly, "Women also won't lower themselves to Prince Li's level. It's just that this consort and prince still need to visit the Su family in the afternoon. Does Prince Li want our prince to visit the Su family while reeking of alcohol?" One had to know that not everyone could be as carefree as King Li. Especially since the Su family is a scholarly family. They have a long history of etiquette. Does Prince Li want this consort and prince to be kicked out by uncle? Mo Xiaoyao, it can't be that you've developed the problem of being afraid of women after getting married, right? Mo Jingli glared at Yili with a dark expression for a while before speaking to Mo Xiaoyao with a cold smile. Mo Xiaoyao looked at him calmly. There was even a trace of a smile on his face. "Jingli, it's not a bad thing to respect your wife's opinion. Li is right. We still need to visit Sir Su and Imperial Censor Su in the afternoon." You know that Sir Hong Yu really dares to kick us out. Mo Jingli was not going to let this go. How could I not know that when returning home, not only does one have to see the maternal family, but one also has to see the maternal family. Stop wasting words. Mo Xiaoyao, are you going to drink I's toast or not? I'm not drinking. Mo Xiaoyao replied bluntly. Yi Li, who was sitting next to him, could clearly feel that Mo Xiaoyao's mood was unusually good. Even when he was talking to Mo Jingli, Yi Li could not help but hear a hint of teasing in his voice. Ahem. Prince Li, since Prince Ding still has things to do, let's not force him. It's not too late to drink when we have time. Fu Zhao helplessly tried to mediate the situation. They had all grown up in the capital and had known each other since they were young. Mo Xiaoyao and Mo Jingli had not been on good terms since they were young. Who would have thought that after not seeing each other for so many years, they would become even worse? This made things difficult for them, the bystanders, to handle. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao, Fu Zhao could not help but rejoice. Mo Xiaoyao's temper was much better now, and he could even listen to Wang Fei's advice. If it was in the past, the two of them would have either fought to the death or come to blows. Jingli. Yi Ying coaxed, don't we still have to go out in the afternoon? Let's treat Prince Ding to a drink next time. Mo Jingli narrowed his eyes at her. He snorted softly and did not speak anymore. Everyone else also sighed in relief. Minister Yi rubbed his aching temples and swore in his heart that he would never let these two sons-in-law drink at the same table again. After lunch, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao held hands and bid farewell to the Su Fu. Before they left, Su Hongyu called Mo Xiaoyao alone to the study to talk for an hour. Yi Li was not allowed to listen in and could only wait outside the study. The brothers of the Su family, other than Su Qingchen whose whereabouts were unknown and Su Qingze who was ordered around by second aunt, were all in the yard with her. Su Qingyan leaned on the table and looked at Yi Li with a grin as he said, Li Jijie, my father won't eat brother-in-law. You don't have to worry about him. Yi Li rolled her eyes at him in exasperation. Which eye of yours saw me worry about him? Su Qingyan pointed at his eyes and said with a smile, both of my eyes saw it. The usually careless Su Qingfeng felt a rare emotion. He looked at Yi Li and said sadly, I didn't think that in just a few days, Li would become someone else's. If Prince Ding bullies you, come back and tell Sanji. Sanji will definitely stand up for you. Yi Li nodded and said seriously, I will remember. Sanji, don't worry. Su Qingfeng sighed and said, in a few days, I will be leaving the capital. Sanji will tell second brother that when second brother gets married, second sister-in-law will often go to the Prince Ding mansion to see you. Su Qingyan smiled and said, Sanji, you don't have to be so exaggerated. The Prince Ding mansion is not a mountain of swords or a sea of flames. With us here, how could Prince Ding dare to bully Li Jijie? Su Qingbai, who was by the side, rolled his eyes and said, who was the one who retreated the moment they saw Prince Ding? How did the Su family produce such a timid lad that they even hoped that he would stand up for Lier? Su Qingyan's face turned red. Thinking of someone's methods, he couldn't help but tremble and said, CGE, you can't blame me for being timid. It's really someone too cruel. Thinking of the two unlucky bandits in the courtyard that night, Su Qingyan went back and had nightmares for a few nights. Now that he saw Mo Xiaoyao, he reflexively wanted to hide behind Su Qingbai. Yi Li looked at Su Qingyan's guilty expression. Although he didn't finish his words, she could guess the gist of it. It was probably someone who did something frightening that scared Su Qingyan. Yi Li didn't intend to delve into this. Mo Xiaoyao was a famous general who had killed his way out of the battlefield when he was young. She didn't expect him to be a spotless and elegant gentleman. After returning to the prince's mansion, Yi Li began to busy herself with taking over the various affairs of the prince's mansion. Just the various account books made Yili look at them for 2 days before she was able to figure them out. At the same time, she was secretly amazed that the Ding prince's mansion was indeed rich. Several generations of princes' accumulated family property made Yili amazed. When she was almost done, she received an invitation from the palace for a banquet. With the reason of sending envoys from various countries to bid farewell, whether it was Mo Xiaoyao or Yili, they obviously couldn't find a reason to refuse. Entering the palace once again, Yili's mood wasn't very good because of the unpleasant experience from the last time. The Ding prince's mansion's horse carriage didn't alight at the palace gates like ordinary nobles. Instead, it directly entered the palace gates. Mo Xiaoyao was wearing a moon-white robe with a silver dragon embroidered with auspicious clouds and eagles. His hair was tied up with a white jade crown inlaid with sapphires. He looked cultured and elegant. Is Li in a bad mood? Yili lazily leaned against the horse carriage and said, "It's nothing. The palace always makes people feel a little depressed." Chapter 95. Mo Xiaoyao couldn't help but smile. I don't know how many people think of ways to enter the palace. Li's way of thinking is very special. Yili faintly glanced at him and said, stepping on the bones of countless people to climb up, or being stepped on by others to climb up, is it really that interesting? Mo Xiaoyao thought and then said with a smile, the process is definitely boring, but the majority of people can't see the process. They only need to imagine that they have climbed to the top. The pleasure of standing above tens of thousands of people is enough for them to forget everything. Yili raised an eyebrow and stared at him for a while before asking, Xiaoyao also thinks this way. Mo Xiaoyao stilled. He looked down at his hand on the armrest of the wheelchair. A long time later, he said in a deep voice, it's not just that I don't want to be stepped on by others to climb up. The carriage was silent for a while before Yili's voice sounded, I don't like stepping on other people, but I also don't like people stepping on me. Prince, we've arrived. The Empress invites Wang Fei, a Jin said in a deep voice from outside the carriage. The carriage was gradually coming to a stop. Yili estimated inside that the carriage was not at any of the places she had been last time. Based on the general location, it should be near the Empress Fengde Palace. Mo Xiaoyao tilted his head and said, I'm going to see the Emperor and can't go in with you. Can you go by yourself? Yili nodded and prepared to leave the carriage. Mo Xiaoyao pulled her back and said in a low voice, be careful. If anything happens, immediately have Qing Wan come out and find a Jin. He's near Fengde Palace. Yili frowned and said, but you. A Jin was Mo Xiaoyao's personal guard and the person he trusted the most. If a Jin wasn't by his side. Mo Xiaoyao laughed and said, you don't think that a Jin is the only person I can trust, right? Don't worry, go. Alright, see you later. Hearing him say this, Yili didn't insist and got off the carriage. There were already people from Fengde Palace waiting outside the carriage. Seeing Yili come down, they hurriedly came forward to greet, this servant greets Princess Ding. This servant is here on the orders of the Empress to welcome Wang Fei. Yili nodded, thank you for your trouble. I don't dare. Princess, please follow this servant. When they entered Fengde Palace, there were already quite a few upper-class women present. Fengde Palace was decorated with a noble atmosphere, but it wasn't overly extravagant. The finer details had a special kind of elegance. Yili couldn't help but feel a little curious about this empress who wasn't famous among the common people. Greetings to the Empress. Long live the Empress. Yili walked into the hall and respectfully bowed to the graceful woman in the hall. Imperial concubine, please dispense with the formalities. Sit. The Empress's voice was elegant and peaceful, without any of the high and mighty aura of the Empress as imagined. Many thanks, Empress. Yili got up and was led by a palace maid to an empty seat at the front. Although Yi Li was considered the youngest of the upper-class women present, Yi Li's status wasn't high. But in terms of status, the imperial household was above all the princes, marquises, and dukes in the capital. The status of the imperial concubine was naturally above all the other women. Even though Yi Li came late, there was still a seat at the front left for her. Yi Li casually looked around and saw many familiar faces. The first madam of the Duke Hua Fu was with Hua Tianxiang. Beside Zhao Yang, eldest princess, and Zhao Ren, eldest princess, were Princess Xixia and Princess Ronghua, who she hadn't seen in a long time. There was also the beautiful Li Wangfei Yiying. At this time, sitting in Feng De Palace, it was clear that they all had some kind of relationship with the imperial household or had titles. Ordinary titled madams weren't among them. After sitting down, Yi Li looked at the empress sitting on the phoenix throne. The empress was wearing a bright yellow phoenix robe, graceful and noble, showing that she was the only queen of the country. When Yi Li looked over, she happened to see the empress looking at her with a smile. She couldn't help but be startled. The empress wasn't particularly beautiful. She was also from the Duke Hua Fu, but Hua Tianxiang's appearance was better than the empress's. But that kind of peaceful and graceful posture was something that Hua Tianxiang and all the other upper-class women present didn't have. "Empress, is this the imperial concubine?" A clear voice came from the opposite side, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Yi Li looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young girl in colorful clothes sitting on the right side of Zhao Yang, eldest princess. Obviously, her status was extraordinary. The empress smiled and said, "Yes, this is the imperial concubine. Speaking of which, Princess Lingyun has been ill since she came to the Chu capital. She hasn't seen the imperial concubine yet." "Princess Ding, this is Princess Lingyun of the Shilin Kingdom." Yi Li nodded and said, "Princess Lingyun greets you." With Yi Li's status, even if Lingyun was a princess, she couldn't be disrespectful. But this princess who had been smiling prettily just now acted as if she didn't hear Yi Li's words. She impudently looked at Yi Li before saying, "I heard Brother Wang say that you pulled out the cloud-embracing sword?" Yi Li nodded slightly and said with a faint smile, "I have indeed seen the cloud-embracing sword." Princess Lingyun wasn't satisfied with this answer. She stood up and raised her chin, saying, "This princess doesn't believe it. This princess wants to compete with you." "I don't know how to use a sword," Yi Li calmly said. "How is that possible? How did you pull out the cloud-embracing sword if you don't know how to use a sword?" Princess Lingyun stared at her and said aggressively. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "Princess, pulling out a sword and using a sword are two different things. Who said that people who don't know how to use a sword can't pull out a sword?" She really didn't understand why these princesses and young misses were so insistent on forcing others to compete with this and that. They didn't care if the other party knew what they wanted to compete with. This princess doesn't care. This princess wants to compete with you. Could it be that you don't dare to accept the challenge? Yi Li stood up. "Princess, you are asking this in front of the empress and all the madams and young misses in the capital. How could I not dare?" Princess Lingyun said with satisfaction, "Since it's like this, where is your sword?" "In reality, I haven't touched any other sword besides the cloud-embracing sword. The sword that Genom of Gojoseon sent me that day was the first time I encountered such a weapon. So I don't have a sword and I don't know how to hold one. Pfft, forcing someone who hasn't even touched a sword to compete with you. Empress, can Tianxiang compete with the general in embroidery tomorrow and claim that my embroidery skills are the best in the world?" Hua Tianxiang leaned against Madame Hua and asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it spread throughout the entire palace. Many people couldn't help but cover their mouths and chuckle. The empress glared at Hua Tianxiang, but there was a faint smile in her eyes. "You have the nerve to talk about your little embroidery." Hua Tianxiang covered her face and laughed. "Aunt Empress, how can you say that? I just want to have a good reputation. The title of being the best in the world is so impressive. Yi Li looked at Hua Tianxiang gratefully. Hua Tianxiang winked at her and leaned against Madame Hua, covering her face shyly. The Empress held back her laughter and said to Princess Lingyun, Princess Ding isn't good at swordsmanship, so let's not compete. Princess Lingyun's face was already red from Hua Tianxiang's words. She gritted her teeth and said, she clearly pulled out the cloud-embracing sword. How can she not know swordsmanship? She's clearly toying with this princess. Chapter 96. The cloud-embracing sword belongs to the Ding Palace. Princess Ding can pull it out however she likes. What does it have to do with you whether her swordsmanship is better or not? Princess Ronghua glanced at Princess Lingyun and sneered, are all foreign princesses so strange? Do they all like to force others to compete with each other? You know that she can't do it, but you still won't give up. Why don't you just ask Princess Ding to admit defeat and admit that your swordsmanship is better than hers? You. Hearing Infanta Ronghua's words, not only Princess Lingyun, but also Princess Xixia, who was beside her, felt a little embarrassed. Many people present couldn't help but remember that Princess Xixia asked Princess Ding to compete with her in dancing during the flower festival. The Empress saw that it was going to be awkward, so she quickly said, well, let's forget about it. Ronghua, don't talk nonsense in front of the two princesses. Princess Ronghua snorted and sat next to Princess Xiaoren and stopped talking. Compared with Yi Li, she hated Zhaoyang Princess and Princess Xixia, who were as aggressive and deep as her. She also hated the new and arrogant Princess Lingyun. Noble Consort Lu is here. With a sharp announcement, Noble Consort Lu, dressed in a yellow dress, stepped into the hall with a cold look. Greetings, Empress. Noble Consort Lu was still as indifferent and arrogant as last time. She just bowed slightly to the Empress. It seemed that this noble consort didn't intend to give face to the Empress Dowager or the Empress. The Empress seemed to be used to Noble Consort Lu's appearance. She nodded slightly and said, no need. Why did Noble Consort Lu come to Fengde Palace today? Many noblewomen present also showed a surprised expression. Noble Consort Lu usually didn't attend the banquets in the palace. Even though many of them went to the palace almost once a month, they rarely saw Noble Consort Lu. Noble Consort Lu said coldly, I have nothing to do. The Emperor said that Empress's palace was lively, so I came to see. Empress, don't you doubt it? The Empress frowned slightly, but still said generously, since you are interested, then sit down quickly. She waved her hand to let the palace maids prepare a seat for Noble Consort Lu. Noble Consort Lu walked to Yi Li and asked, can I sit here? Yi Li smiled and said, if you don't mind, please sit down. Seeing Noble Consort Lu sit down next to Yi Li, the Empress didn't bother to prepare anything else for her. The Empress had always kept a respectful distance from Noble Consort Lu, the Emperor's favorite concubine. Fortunately, although Noble Consort Lu was very arrogant and sometimes even capricious and unreasonable, she restrained herself a little in front of the Empress. Today's coldness and unreasonableness was the limit. At least compared to the Empress Dowager, the Empress felt that she was strangely balanced. Noble Consort Lu sat next to Yi Li with a cold and serious face. The women who wanted to talk to Yi Li, the new Princess Ding, gave up for the time being. They didn't know that Noble Consort Lu never gave face to others. If they got close to her and annoyed her, they would only be embarrassed. With no one to talk to, Yi Li had to sit in her seat and listen to others. Fortunately, she was also a person who could sit still. I heard what happened in the hall just now. Yi Li thought that Noble Consort Lu wouldn't talk to her. Hearing the faint voice next to her, she was slightly stunned. You are so useless. Last time, you didn't know how to dance with the Princess of Nanzhao. This time, you don't know how to sword with the Princess of West Hill either. What do you know? Noble Consort Lu's voice was full of dissatisfaction and disdain. Fortunately, her voice was very low. Otherwise, the rumor that Princess Ding was scolded by noble consort Lu at the first palace banquet would be spread all over the capital. Listening to noble consort Lu's scolding, Yili didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If she remembered correctly, this noble consort Lu only admired Mo Xiaoyao and not his mother. What's with this tone full of disdain? Nyang Nyang, I have no interest in dancing. Also, the Ding Palace doesn't need a princess who can dance. As for swordsmanship, it doesn't seem to be something that the noble ladies in the capital need to learn. Noble consort Lu snorted and said, "You forgot to mention that your painting skills are ordinary. You even need people to write poems for you. I need to be careful. If you dare to lose face, I won't forgive you." Nyang Nyang, are you really not Mo Xiaoyao's mother? What are noble consort Lu and Princess Ding talking about? Why are you talking so happily? Eldest Princess Xiaoren suddenly asked. Noble consort Lu raised her head and stared at her for a while before saying, "Which eye of eldest Princess Xiaoren saw that I was happy?" Eldest Princess Xiaoren choked and couldn't say anything. Yili sighed in her heart. She was endlessly envious of noble consort Lu's straightforward personality. It was a pity that not everyone had the right to be so straightforward. If it wasn't for the emperor's protection, with noble consort Lu's personality, no matter how good her family background was, she wouldn't be able to live long in the palace. Seeing eldest Princess Xiaoren's speechless and angry expression, noble consort Lu seemed to be in a good mood. She stared at the person in front of her and proudly said, "Didn't eldest princess ask what I and Princess Ding were talking about? I said that since Princess Ding doesn't know swordsmanship, how about I compare notes with Princess Lingyun?" Noble consort. The empress frowned in disapproval. Noble consort Lu didn't care. She only coldly stared at Princess Lingyun and said, "Princess, what do you think?" Although Princess Lingyun hadn't been in the capital for long, it didn't stop her from knowing that noble consort Lu was the most favored noble consort of the Eastern Emperor Chu. No matter what, she definitely wouldn't make a move against noble consort Lu. Regardless of whether she won or lost, if she accidentally hurt noble consort Lu, the Eastern Emperor Chu would investigate and she would be the passive party. After all, they were still on Eastern Chu soil. Just now, Ling Yun was just joking with Princess Ding. Ling Yun is young and doesn't know any better. How could she dare to make a move against noble consort? Alright, noble consort. Princess Ling Yun is just being childish. Moreover, she doesn't know that Princess Ding doesn't know swordsmanship. She isn't deliberately trying to humiliate our Chu state. The Empress lightly said. Her face had a rare resolute expression that couldn't be disobeyed. As a noble consort Lu standing up for Princess Ding was both good and bad. Moreover, the matter of noble consort Lu admiring Prince Ding before entering the palace wasn't a secret among the nobles. What she needed to do was find a suitable excuse for noble consort Lu to stand up for him. She chatted with the Empress for a while. Because it was still early for the banquet, the Empress invited the noblewomen to the imperial garden to enjoy themselves. Thus, everyone thanked the Empress and left for the imperial garden. Before leaving, noble consort Lu was asked to stay by the Empress. Once they left Feng de Palace, Hua Tianxiang immediately approached Yili and said with a smile, "Greetings to Princess Ding." Yili glanced at her and said, "Do you have too much time on your hands?" Hua Tianxiang waved her hand and said, "How can you say this? According to the rules, I should at least greet the imperial consort." "So, noble consort Lu didn't make things difficult for you just now, did she?" Yili didn't understand. Why would she make things difficult for me? Hua Tianxiang silently looked at her with a compassionate expression. "Li, I've long told you to go out more often, but you didn't listen. Don't tell me you don't know noble consort Lu." Hua Tianxiang finally realized that it wasn't a good thing to gossip about a noble consort in the palace. She moved closer to Yili and whispered in her ear, "Before noble consort Lu entered the palace, she was very admiring of Prince Ding." Yili was speechless. Even Hua Tianxiang knew this. It seemed that it wasn't just admiring. She nodded, I know. She didn't make things difficult for me. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.